Good afternoon, everybody. Excellencies, esteemed speakers, moderators, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the launch of Accelerating Green, a sustainability series by In Diplomacy, supported by the Diplomatic and Consular Corps and sponsored by OLAM International. It is my honor and privilege to welcome His Excellency George Dumore, Dean of the Diplomatic Corps and Ambassador of Mongolia, our keynote speaker, Honorable Douglas Fu, President, Singapore Manufacturing Federation, His Excellency Will Hodgman, High Commissioner of Australia, His Excellency Ignacio Concha, Ambassador of Chile, His Excellency Modise Mokitlane, High Commissioner of South Africa, His Excellency Kakramon Shakirao, Ambassador of Uzbekistan, Bapak Krishnawan, Director for various renewable energy from Indonesia's Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources, Ms. Esther N. from CDL, Dr. Christopher Stewart from OLAM, Aaron Oliveira from Earth 300, and Lauren Sokin from Resilient Cities Network, and our moderators, Johan Berger and Joanne Flynn. My name is Namita Dar. I am the founder of SunMedia Singapore. We have been helping diplomatic missions in covering subjects like foreign policy, bilateral relations, investment, trade, and culture through our various media platforms and titles for over 2 decades. Accelerating Green is urgent. Never in history the answer to a simple question, how is the weather, has been as important and critical as it is now. We all have only one home, this earth, of which we are all custodians, and we are all responsible to preserve it and do everything possible to keep it from deteriorating any further. We cannot be ignorant of what is happening now in terms of climate change and the urgency to implement sustainability policies and practices. The launch of Accelerating Green Sustainability Initiative is our starting point to contribute towards the healing of Mother Earth. As humanity grapples at one end with the COVID-19 pandemic, it is at the same time facing the wrath of Mother Nature through cyclones, earthquakes, forest fires, and floods. We do not have time enough to solve one and get to the other. We have to tackle both together. They are both existential threats to mankind, so it must start now with our eyes and ears open, while each one of us can contribute. Through collaborations, we can accelerate our green efforts more. As a media company, we wish to be a catalyst for conversations and collaborations between countries, corporations, and communities in our circle of influence and beyond. Action towards sustainability, climate change, and global warming is everyone's responsibility. And today, we take a pledge to play our role to the fullest. For this inaugural e-conference, we have invited 12 esteemed speakers from government and private sector from various parts of the world to share their sustainability action, challenges, and plans. The webinar today, besides the launch section, has three very interesting panels with three panelists each. So please sit back, take notes, and make a plan for how you can do your part. For any questions that you may have, please write them in the chat box and we'll be very happy to bring them to the speakers. To all the audience who have signed up for today's webinar, we value your presence. Together, we will be able to accelerate green. Now, it is my pleasure to invite the Ambassador of Mongolia, the Dean of Diplomatic Corps, to launch the initiative. His Excellency Tumor has been representing Mongolia in Singapore since July 2015 and has been instrumental in creating new opportunities between the two countries. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm also happy to share that Mongolia is one of the first countries to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals. 6 months following the adoption of SDGs by the global community, the Parliament of Mongolia approved its long term development strategy, known as Mongolia's Sustainable Development Vision 2030. Excellency, the Dean of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps and Ambassador of Mongolia to Singapore, over to you, sir. And may I kindly request you to launch Accelerating Green and say a few words. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Accelerating Green. First of all, I would like to express my utmost gratitude to Namita and her colleagues at SunMedia for inviting me to address the launch of the Accelerating Green series. Sustainable development, green economy, renewable energy, all have become a crucial aspect of every nation's development policy plan. All United Nations member states have adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development back in 2015. It emphasizes 17 sustainable development goals, such as affordable and clean energy, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, and climate action, which consists of over 160 targets and over 5,400 actions. As Namita pointed out, Mongolia is one of the first countries to adopt the Sustainable Development Goals. 6 months following the adoption of the SDGs by the global community, the Parliament of Mongolia approved its long-term development strategy called Mongolia's Sustainable Development Vision 2030, reflecting sustainable development. The Mongolian government has also initiated multi-stakeholder working group to identify national sustainable development goal targets and indicators. A National Council for Sustainable Development is led by the Prime Minister, and the Parliamentary Subcommittee on Sustainable Development Goals are in place as well. The government of Mongolia and the US Millennium Challenge Corporation launched a $350 million Mongolia Water Impact Compact in 2021 with the aim of expanding the sustainable supply of water and enhancing the long-term financial, institutional, and environmental sustainability of the water sector. Moreover, Mongolia's first solar plus storage project started its implementation, adding up to the existing wind power plants as Mongolia stepped up its adoption of renewable energy and efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Despite our continued efforts, the challenges remain. We need to combine our joint efforts, collaborate to tackle the challenges, share useful experiences and solutions in order to finally reach our common goal of sustainable development. Not one government can do this alone without the support of researchers, businesses, of stakeholders, as well as without the cooperation of the broader international community. Every one of us have our part to play. So I think today's webinar will play an important role to this, and let us all join hands to build a greener, stronger, and more sustainable future. We can do it together. So I wish you all a successful and fruitful webinar ahead. Thank you, and stay safe. Thank you, Namita.
Excellency. And now we want to thank you by taking a walk into the forest. And I hope you enjoy this little clip which we have prepared to thank you, since we are not able to give you any mementos because we are far. All right.
That's wonderful.
Thank you very much. So one day I hope we are able to increase the forest cover and all of us can take a walk in this beautiful forest and breathe fresher, nicer air. Thank you, Excellency, for being part of this. The issue of climate change crosses all borders, as you said. As such, it needs borderless collective efforts. With a visible increase in fires, hurricanes, and flood, it is clear swift collaborative action is required. I am very grateful to Ambassador for supporting this initiative. This is first in the series of many more. Now, it is my pleasure to share with you a keynote message from Honorable Douglas Fu, President, Singapore Manufacturing Federation. The Honorable Mr. Douglas Fu wears many hats. He is the President of Singapore Manufacturing Federation and Vice Chairman of Singapore Business Federation and Vice President also of Singapore's National Employers Federation. So that means essentially he controls a lot of people, and people can make things happen and can make changes happen. He's one of Singapore's three appointed representatives at the ASEAN Business Advisory Council. While Mr. Douglas Fu is very important in taking decisions within Singapore, he also is able to influence people in the ASEAN region. Well respected in Singapore, Mr. Fu was a nominated Member of Parliament of Singapore and is Singapore's non-resident High Commissioner to Tanzania. Now, Singapore Manufacturing Federation has around 5,000 members, and they have many active programs that support sustainability for manufacturers. And we think that's a large catchment area because while governments make policies, it is at the business level where they can be implemented, where people go for livelihood, and it can be more impactful. Uh, for Singapore Manufacturing Federation, it is no longer nice to have, but now must have part of their business plans to make sustainability is followed in their business practices. This year, SMF launched a major initiative on packaging, waste management, and SMF President today will speak on integrating industry and business for sustainable action. So over to you, Mr. Douglas Fu. So we will have a keynote. We will listen to Mr. Douglas Fu's keynote on integrating industry and business for sustainable action. So action.
Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, and High Commissioners, esteemed speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good day to all of you. I'm honored to have been invited here today in my capacity as the President of the Singapore Manufacturing Federation as a guest of honor for this important e-conference that SunMedia is organizing to support the Climate Month. Allow me first and foremost to give you a brief introduction of the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, or SMF for short, for which I'm humbled to be the current president. SMF was and local enterprises of different sizes, both large and SMEs, representing a wide spectrum of industries in the manufacturing sector. As the premier advocate for Singapore manufacturing community, the SMF mission is to further the manufacturing sector's growth and facilitate its competitiveness and sustainability. In this regard, the SMF regularly organizes activities such as webinars, workshops, online exhibitions, networking events, along with offering a host of comprehensive and carried out by companies globally so that our members can assimilate these practices into their own operations and enterprise. Despite the challenges that have presented to Singapore's manufacturing sector as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, the SMF has adopted several sustainable practices that we hope will inspire our members in the manufacturing and manufacturing-related industries to follow suit and to emerge stronger. An example of sustainable practice that the SMF has incorporated in our operations is our establishment of a Manufacturing Alliance Transformation Office, or MATO for short. MATO is a product of a collaboration between the SMF, Enterprise Singapore, and other trade associations and chambers, or TACs, to come together to drive transformation and innovations in many critical industries of Singapore, including the food sector, precision engineering, electronics, just to name a few. In this collaboration, SMF identifies companies that require assistance to update their technologies and processes and partner with our partnering TACs to recommend solution providers to these companies. These companies can then tap on the available support to implement these solutions, which in turn will increase their output and by extension, increase their companies' contributions to Singapore's GDP. This is a circular system, but one that has proven to be effective. SMF itself has taken steps to reduce our carbon footprint by adopting environmentally friendly practices. Additionally, COVID-19 pandemic shown that SMF can continue to function and flourish despite having a sizable portion of our workforce working from home. With this remote working arrangement in place, our workforce remains just as, if not more, productive than ever, whilst reducing Singapore's collective carbon footprint. Before I go further on sustainable practices in manufacturing, permit me to share with you some insights on Singapore's manufacturing landscape. Singapore, though small, with limited land mass to build industrial plants, has a robust manufacturing sector that contributes about 21%, or about 106 billion Singapore dollars of Singapore's total GDP. Our manufacturing sector is one of the few exceptions, together with Japan, Korea, Germany, that has maintained for growing the sector to contribute around 1/5 of our country's GDP. In fact, our manufacturing sector is recognized as one of the leading pillars to continue to spur Singapore's economic growth, and the Singapore government has put up a master vision for manufacturing sector, namely Manufacturing 2030, where we target for Singapore manufacturing sector to grow by 50%. Singapore's manufacturing sector is also globally competitive. In 2020 Bloomberg Innovative Index, Singapore was ranked third most innovative nation and ranked second globally for manufacturing value add. Singapore also ranked as the fourth largest exporter of high technology products in the world, according to the World Bank Open Data for High Technology Exports. Against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, Singapore's manufacturing sector has remained surprisingly resilient and continues to report positive growth, with manufacturing output increasing by 7.3% last year. In fact, in a recent monthly manufacturing performance report, all the clusters, namely precision engineering, transport, biomedical manufacturing, general manufacturing, chemicals, and electronics, have recorded an output growth. By simply looking at the performance indicators, one would not be remiss to think that adopting sustainable practices in the present circumstance will only add to the issues that all businesses are struggling to deal with. However, I must caution that such a mindset may prove to be detrimental in the long run. Increasingly, we can see more stakeholders, including governments around the world, investors, and consumers, that are placing greater emphasis on sustainability. Bearing that in mind, SMF has been actively advocating to our members to develop and adopt sustainable practices. I'm proud to say that SMF was one of the pioneers in Singapore to quickly adopt the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals as soon as they were passed by the United Nations. We are continuing our good work, and we are regularly carrying out programs and initiatives to understand the impact that the concept of sustainability has on our manufacturing industry. In fact, we have held several roundtable discussions on environment, social, and governance, ESG, with our member companies this year to brainstorm on this important subject. SMF has also recently created a Telegram channel in which our members who have adopted sustainable practices in their business or who are keen to find out more can come together to learn from one another. This is a prime example of how the industry is helping itself. I should also add that the SMF uses this platform to communicate to our members the latest developments and news about the sustainability movement. As I mentioned earlier, stakeholders are becoming increasingly concerned with sustainability, and the Singapore government has taken note of this concern. In that regard, earlier this year, the Singapore government unveiled its multifaceted Green Plan. With the implementation of the Green Plan, Singapore has set lofty goals such as reducing the waste sent to our main landfill by 30% by 2030, or transforming our petrochemical park, Jurong Island, into a sustainable energy and chemicals park. While these goals may come off as imposing, I strongly believe that by leveraging on the relative close relations shared by the tripartite partners, which comprise of the government, the business, and the workforce, the goals are achievable. One such example of how the tripartite relationship plays a part in Singapore's sustainability goals is the Packaging Partnership Program, or PPP for short, which was launched earlier this year. The PPP is the product of the collaboration between SMF, the National Environment Agency of Singapore, or short NEA, that aims to support companies on their journey towards more sustainable packaging waste management. The launch of the PPP comes at the heels of the implementation of the Mandatory Packaging Reporting, or MPR for short, which requires producers of packaging and packaged products, such as brand owners, manufacturers, importers, and retailers to submit annual reports to NEA on the types and amounts of packaging that they put on the Singapore market and their 3R plans for packaging. To do that, we regularly organize events for participants to educate them on the requirements of the MPR, as well as guide them on how their companies can adhere to these requirements. Another facet of the Singapore's Green Plan is the government's statement to support local enterprises to adopt sustainable services, solutions, standards, and to enhance their resource efficiency and tap on new opportunities in sustainability. This reassures businesses in Singapore that the government will support Singaporean companies as they undertake their journey towards sustainability. Given the culmination of factors such as the reduced demand from businesses during this period, the greater emphasis on sustainability and the advent of disruptive technologies, I doubt there will ever be a more opportune time than now for businesses to take stock on how they may induce more sustainable practices into their operations. This may be viewed as a short-term sacrifice for long-term gains. While we continue to combat the COVID-19 virus, today's webinar is a demonstration of how even in trying times, there are still opportunities that allow us to strengthen our business resilience by introducing sustainable actions so that we may continue to thrive, come what may. I take this opportunity to applaud Ms. Nomita and her team in SunMedia to organize this important conference on sustainability. More importantly, I congratulate Ms. Nomita on her success in bringing all of us together to share and learn from each other and journey together to create a better environment for ourselves, our families, our businesses, and for many generations to come. Before I conclude, allow me to use this occasion to petition to each of you to play a little part in this important sustainability subject and protect our environment and this world that we are all living together. I hope everyone here will find this webinar insightful and valuable for your businesses. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Fu, for that very informative keynote. I'm certain Singapore's Green Plan can be a great model, an example to follow. And I agree with you in totality. Now is the most opportune period for businesses to take stock on how they can induce more sustainable practices. Sharing with each other is a step forward towards accelerating green. Thanks for your encouragement and support as usual, always supporting SunMedia. We value your partnership, a heartfelt gratitude from all of us at SunMedia. Mr. Fu, we are very proud of the kind of work you are doing at SMF, and with collaborations with foreign missions we work with, we are sure there can be more business for Singapore companies and more knowing on the other side. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, after listening to Mr. Douglas Fu, now it is my honor to introduce my very special moderators, Mr. Johan Berger and Ms. Joanne Flynn. Mr. Johan Berger joins us from Abu Dhabi. He is with the UAE University and he's the Business Development Manager for Executive Education. Prior to this, he was a senior lecturer at Nanyang Business School in Singapore. Johan is an Africa specialist and a regular at Singapore's conference circles. A very warm welcome. We are very happy to have you with us, moderate the panels, and help us start accelerating green at where we are.
Thank you, Namita.
Now it is my greatest pleasure to introduce my very charming, very accomplished friend and mentor, Joanne Flynn. She's the strategic sustainability specialist. She is much in demand, especially now as she handholds corporates to their sustainability goals. And with her, part of their projects, they deliver big business results. Originally from Tasmania, Australia, she has lived in Singapore for over 20 years. And thank you, Joanne, for being part of Accelerating Green. And we hope to do a lot of work with you. And we are very honored that you will be part of the 3 sessions today. And we get the dialogue going. Welcome to Accelerating Green.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here with a very, very esteemed and magnificent company that we have today and being part of this launch. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now it's the time for us to go to the first session. And we have 3 speakers in the first session, and both the moderators, the music is very loud. Reduce the music. So we have 3 speakers, and for this, there's much to learn from across the world to help Asia move forward, promote partnerships in circular economy and sustainable development, and profile successes and best practices. We are delighted to introduce our first speaker, His Excellency Will Hodgman, High Commissioner of Australia to Singapore. Before his accreditation to Singapore, His Excellency, the Honourable Will Hodgman, was the inaugural chair of the Australian Business Council Business Growth Fund. He was the Premier of Australia State of Tasmania from 2014 to 2020, which achieved net zero in 2015. It is my honor now to invite His Excellency High Commissioner Hodgman to speak about cooperation in low-emission tech and renewable energy, hydrogen and solar. Over to you, Excellency. We are very honored to have you. The stage is yours. Could unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. To the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps and to other distinguished participants in today's forum, and to you, Namita, and to Diplomacy, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this important forum addressing an issue as critical as any, and that includes, as the globe battles a pandemic. Climate change too is a global emergency. And I will take a moment, and not to ingratiate myself with the esteemed moderator, Joanne Flynn, but to extend to her also a belated hello after some years apart, to open my contribution today with a little background, having come to Singapore just on 6 months ago from Tasmania, Australia's island state, where I served as Premier for 6 years. And Tasmania is also Australia's renewable energy battery. It has only around 1% of Australia's total landmass, but collects around 13% of its total water. And much of that is stored in 5 of Australia's largest dams for fresh drinking water, but also to generate carbon-free hydropower. And Tasmania also has the cleanest air for any populated place on the planet. And that powers an extensive network of wind farms that form a large component of Tasmania's renewable energy supply. And together, they provide enough renewable energy to not only meet Tasmania's needs, but also provide surplus energy into Australia's national electricity market. And we do so, or Tasmania does so, via an undersea power cable, which coincidentally is owned by Singapore's Keppel Infrastructure Trust. And in combination, Tasmania has recently become 100% self-sufficient in renewable energy. It's one of the few places in the world with that exceptional status. And as Namita said in my introduction, during my term as Premier, Tasmania also achieved another momentous milestone when in 2018 we became the first jurisdiction in Australia, and again one of few in the world, to achieve zero net emissions. And this target was achieved 30 years ahead of schedule. And while I acknowledge, and it is true, that Tasmania does hold sizable natural competitive advantages to utilise renewable energy, it has needed a massive investment over many years to capitalise on it. And in order to achieve our sustainability goals in government, we also needed an action plan with practical measures from households right through to major industry to help bring emissions down. So we developed a 5-year action plan that was really a whole of community effort, including government, industry, R&D, institutions, all to understand climate change, to advance renewable energy, to build climate resilience, and to support community action. And it was all backed, I should say, with a significant financial commitment. And under this plan, Tasmania has the lowest per capita greenhouse gas emissions in Australia, and our greenhouse gas emissions have in fact declined by 95% from 1990 levels. And our emissions per capita are well below the global average. And in fact, for the last 6 years in a row, we have met our emissions reduction target, which is legislated, it's enshrined in legislation at net zero. And now the Tasmanian and Australian governments are working together on plans for a second interconnector cable and new pumped hydro storage schemes to unlock further massive potential in renewable energy in Tasmania in areas including hydrogen, ocean wave and biomass. So, very proudly so, although Tasmania is Australia's smallest state, it offers a large blueprint for what other places across the globe might do in developing renewable energy and addressing climate change. And while Tasmania is indeed the standout state, insofar as renewable energy is concerned at least, Australia's national effort to reduce emissions and invest in renewables is also impressive. Australia has reduced emissions by 19% since 2005, and we're on track to meet and beat our 2030 target. Australia is building and investing in renewables at record levels with the highest uptake in the world in household solar, and it's projected that around half of our national electricity supply will come from renewables by just 2025, and this is a massive uplift in Australia, largely driven by advancing practical, commercially viable, low emissions technologies, including in hydrogen, green steel and long duration battery storage, and also by accelerating their development and uptake, not only in Australia, but in countries including in our region. And we're working with many, including in Singapore, where on this agenda, like so many others, we have much in common, much to collaborate on and much to contribute. Indeed, last year, Australia and Singapore entered a new MOU to advance cooperation, to share expertise and to reduce emissions in priority areas of hydrogen, carbon capture, use and storage, renewable energy trade, measurement and verification of emissions reporting. And following this, our Prime Ministers at their recent in-person annual leaders meeting here in Singapore, they launched a new $30 million partnership to accelerate the deployment of low emissions fuels and technologies and to trial the use of clean hydrogen and ammonia in port operations and to explore the potential for hydrogen in the maritime sector. So simply, hydrogen that Australia could produce and export for use in one of the world's biggest and most important shipping hubs, Singapore. The Prime Ministers also discussed an ambitious major project called the Sun Cable Power Link, which plans to build a massive solar farm and battery storage facility in Australia's Northern Territory to export renewable power via a 3,800 kilometre undersea cable to Singapore by 2027. Now, this is an ambitious project, but the proponents and government officials here and in Australia are in regular discussions to collaborate and undertake feasibility and due diligence assessments. And it would, of course, be a very, very powerful addition to the outstanding track record that is collaboration between our two countries. As indeed was the other major announcement from the recent meeting of Prime Ministers Morrison and Lee for our nations to collaborate on a brand new green economy agreement, another pioneering initiative, not unlike the digital economy agreement struck between our countries last year. And it's envisaged that it would cover a broad range of elements, including trade and environmental goods and services, green financing, carbon credit, trading, renewable technologies and energy efficiency, and importantly undertaken in ways that do not unnecessarily restrict trade and investment. And it's expected, and indeed in my experience necessary, that they will closely involve and engage the non-government sector, business, industry, science and research institutions in the development and application of this agreement. And when Australia's Trade Minister visited Singapore just over a fortnight ago and met with Prime Minister Lee and Ministers Gan and Fu, it was agreed that a working group be established to progress this work as a priority. And I should also note that importantly, the GEA is envisaged that it would benefit not only both our countries, but also the Southeast Asia region and our global effort. So thank you again for the opportunity to participate in this forum. It is a very important discussion on our efforts to work together to reduce emissions and to address climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I could almost breathe clear, fresh Tasmanian air, and I hope with borders opening, we can actually do so. And so we are very honored to hear from you. So many collaborative things that are happening between Singapore and Australia. And we know that these are going to have multiplying effects and will bear fruits for both our countries. I'm sure my moderators have lots of questions for you, but we were very honored to listen to all the wonderful sharing. And it is for us also we are very grateful that we are able to learn from Tasmania, which has a very good proven track record. And we look forward to sharing it with other countries which are represented in our forum as well. Thank you, Excellency, and we'll get back to you shortly once the question and answer session starts. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the second speaker of this panel, the Ambassador of Chile to Singapore, His Excellency Ignacio Concha, who prior to being the ambassador to Singapore was the Consul General of Chile in Shanghai, China from 2017 to 2020. A career diplomat, Ambassador Concha has served in the embassies of Chile in Argentina, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Spain, and Venezuela. Today, the ambassador has agreed to share cooperation in green hydrogen, and this is something Singapore has been very keen on and is looking forward to. Ambassador Concha, a very warm welcome. Thank you for agreeing to be part of our exercise. And the floor is yours, Excellency. Uh, Please enlighten us on how Singapore and other countries present here can cooperate with Chile in green hydrogen. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you, Nomita. Good afternoon. First of all, my acknowledgement to my colleagues here, ambassadors, and in particular, our Dean. Organizers, of course, you, Nomita, thank you for inviting me to share my country's initiative in the transition to green technologies, of course, guided by the Paris 2030 goals. And of course, all the participants here, I see a great number of them, 67, which is a great number. Please, Nomita, could you start the presentation? Wonderful. So a clean energy revolution is taking place across the world. We heard the Australian ambassador, so we're in the same path, underscored by the steady expansion of the renewable energy sector and the global warming. When witnessing floods that have hit several countries in the past day, it is even more imperative than ever to address this global challenge in a coordinated and collaborative way. The world needs urgent and unprecedented systemic changes to cut emissions in half by 2030 and reach net zero emissions by 2050. At the latest, if governments really aspire to achieve the Paris Agreement 2030 target. But beyond these imperatives, this green revolution represents a major endeavor and as well as immense economic for countries that manufacture, export, and trade with clean energies. For this, I will give a glimpse about my country's green hydrogen strategy and what is my country doing in terms of tackle the global warming. Next, please. The Chilean strategy, hydrogen strategy, consists of 4 pillars. The one is the commission of all coal-fired power plants. One of the axes of the plan is the phasing out of all coal-fired power plants by 2040. However, and given the rapid entry into service of new solar and thermal solar plants, it is expected by December of this year, a second batch of 8 plants will be closed and another 18 by 2025. Second, the National Green Strategy proposes that the country shall reach 5 gigawatts of electrolysis capacity by 2025. Produce the cheapest green hydrogen on the planet by 2030 and be among the 3 main exporters by 2040. Third, energy efficiency could become the most important milestone to reach the goal carbon neutrality, contributing about 35% to the reduction of emissions. Fourth, one of the keys to carbon neutrality is the electrification of many energies usage, promoting the incorporation of new clean technologies. To this end, electromobility strategy seeks to ensure that 40% of private vehicles and 100% of public transport vehicles will be electric by 2040. Third, please. And we will develop this strategy in 3 different stages or phases. By 25, this first wave will be oriented to large-scale domestic consumption. Shorter-term opportunities are focused in the replacement of imported ammonia with locally produced ammonia from green hydrogen. Second, by 2030, the production of green hydrogen will be more competitive, and its use will expand to land and progressively to other forms of transport, maritime transport, for instance, displacing the use of other fuels in distribution networks, gas pipelines. Third, new export markets will open as other countries progress in their decarbonization plans. Hence, more markets shall grow accordingly. Next, please. So this abundant renewable energy faces us and our partners with the challenge and the opportunity to become the lowest cost producer of green hydrogen on Earth. Our national green hydrogen strategy is aimed at turning this promise into reality. Next, please. In the Atacama Desert, in the north of the country, the one part in red color, with the highest solar radiance on the planet, and in the Patagonia, the south, deep south, towards the Antarctica, with strong and consistent winds, we have the renewable energy potential to install 70 times the electricity generation capacity we use today. Next, please. A good example of its leading position in the transition to clean energies took place last June, with the inauguration of Cerro Dominador plant, Latin America's first and largest solar thermal project in the Atacama Desert. This plant can generate power 24/7 due to its cutting-edge technology. 7, please. Okay, such geographical advantage allow us, according to a report by McKinsey, that my country has the best comparative and competitive advantages, being the cheapest placed in the world to produce green hydrogen. You see in the right column the flag of my country, so that marks the lowest price, which is around 150, a bit less than that. Next, please. It is also important to remind that last February, we signed a memorandum of understanding for cooperation on hydrogen with Singapore. We attach great importance to this agreement that will allow us to start exporting to ASEAN countries using Singapore as a regional hub. Also to help Singapore to achieve its own Paris 2030 goals. Next, please. But I'm afraid we cannot do this transition alone. We need foreign investment and technology to do so. At the present stage, there is a promising number of projects that are developments, and there is more to come towards 2040 as the government decommissions the remaining coal-fired power plants. You see, we have 7 projects that are in different stages, and most likely one of these, I think is the number 7, is going to entry into operations in quite soon, 1 more year, something like that. It's very promising, this one. Next one, please. So, in short, this is what we expect to happen in the next year. From attracting new investment, start producing clean energies and become one of the largest producers of green hydrogen in the planet. So the magic number here is 2030, bit towards 2035, but the goal is getting 2030 being one of the leaders producer of green hydrogen in the world. Next one, please. So people may ask themselves why Chile is the place to produce green hydrogen at that low price. It's because of our geography. With its long extension and diverse climate, starting from north, desert in the north and very cold climate and windy in the south, all of this allows that. The north it has the strongest solar radiation on planets, which is true. And while in the extreme south Patagonia, strong and constant wind are generated. People who have visited a city named Punta Arenas, they remember the strong gusts of wind. Normally it's around 100 and 120 kilometers per hour. So there's an enormous reserve of energy in the Patagonia. Next, please. And of course, this transition into new and clean energies and being super efficient in hydrogen poses a challenge for a country like Chile, and because it's so remote and so far away from country's market that we have to overcome the, and I quote the name of a book, The Tyranny of Distance. So its economic success will depend on the delivery cost versus homegrown green hydrogen in these particular markets, say Europe, Japan, Korea. But experts estimates that the cost of production will be so low that it will significantly offset the relative disadvantage of distance from the major purchasing markets. Also, Chile shall produce and export goods using zero carbon fuels, certifying our exports for end users as a truly green and environment friendly. It's a huge challenge. It will also enable us to export renewable energy to the world in the form of green liquid hydrogen, green ammonia, and clean synthetic fuels. So because of this, Chile has pledged itself to use its renewable advantage to phase out our coal-fired power plants by 2040 and be carbon neutral by 2050. Next, please. And finally, thank you very much for your attention. And again, Nomita, for inviting me to this super interesting webinar.
Thank you, Excellency. Thanks for that wonderful sharing. It's been my dream to visit Chile. And I think as soon as everything opens up, I'm going there to explore green hydrogen like many of the others at the forum must be thinking. So we are all set to pack our bags and enjoy Chile and at the same time explore sustainability for a better world. Thank you, Excellency, for giving us an insight into what your plans are and what to expect. Please stay on as my moderators are cooking some very nice questions for you. And in the meanwhile, I will introduce our third and final speaker of this panel representing Indonesia, Bapak Krishnawan, Director, Various Renewable Energy, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. Welcome, Bapak. As you know, Bapak, SunMedia has been producing 2 publications dedicated to Indonesia. One of the titles is Opportunity Indonesia, and the other one is IndoConnect. and we have been bringing out these magazines for over 20 years. We know for sure the opportunity in Indonesia in every space, and especially sustainability, is enormous. Although COVID-19 has been imposing many challenges to Indonesia currently, we know Indonesia is resilient, and we know that you will emerge stronger. We at Singapore are with you at this hour. Baba. As
And
Southeast Asia, sir, as Southeast Asia's largest economy, Indonesia's implementation of sustainability is very critical, not just to Indonesia, but to all of Southeast Asia. Pak Krishnavan will speak about Indonesia's commitment to lead the United Nations 21st Conference of the Parties in Paris, or commonly known to everyone as COP21. He will share Indonesia's plans to develop more renewable energy resources to meet its ambitions to be a net zero energy nation, as well as address the issues of what will be happening to its coal-fired power plants, as many people are wondering, yes, while they are moving from this to others, what happens to the coal-fired plants during the transition to NZE. Pak Krishnavan, my gratitude for your time, and the floor is yours. Please enlighten us on what is happening in Indonesia on sustainability front.
Thank you, Nomita, for encouraged words. Distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to the Expo SG for inviting us the webinar, Accelerating Green Towards Collaboration Action. It is indeed a great honor for me to have the opportunity to deliver a speed and information related to the Indonesian energy transition situation, especially in developing renewable energy. As you may know, Indonesia committed to reduce 29% of its greenhouse gas emission by 2030 by its own effort, and to reduce more emission up to 41% with international support. For the energy sector, we committed to reduce 314 until 398 million tons CO2 emission by 2030. In 2020, Indonesian national determined contribution realization for energy sector has reached 64.4 million ton CO2 emission, with the main contribution are coming from new and renewable energy and followed by the energy efficiency and low carbon fuel. Our current energy system is heavily dominated by fossil fuel, while on the other hand, we have abundant potential of renewable energy. We will transform to the energy system by principles such as availability, accessibility, affordability, sustainability, and competitiveness, so that we will combine the fossil fuel with clean technology using CCT, CCS, or CCUS, and net sink to reduce the emission. While we also push green energy implementation with new renewable energy acceleration through primary energy substitution, biofuel, co-firing, RDF, SEF, fossil energy conversion such as the desalination, adding up new renewable capacity, focusing on solar PV, and increase non-electricity, non-biofuel, new renewable energy such as briquette, biogas, CBG. In addition, electric vehicles, battery, and hydrogen will also support the transitions. Last but not least, the implementation of smart grid to accommodate higher penetration of VRE. This transition will make Indonesia achieve its energy independence, energy security, sustainable development, and low carbon and climate resilience. The transition is documented in our draft grand strategy energy and will accelerate the use of renewable energy with additional capacity around 38 gigawatt by 2035. And solar PV is prioritized because it's relatively cheaper investment cost and short installation duration. Referring the simulation of long-term planning supply and demand in energy sector, carbon neutral will be achieved in 2060 or sooner with international assistance through several strategies as follow. Massive new and renewable development such as solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, hydro, ocean, nuclear, hydrogen, and also battery energy storage. And then reducing of fossil energy resource utilization through co-firing biomass, retiring age coal-fired power plant, and combined cycle power plant. And then we already decided no new coal-fired power plant, except for it has signed PPA or under construction states. New fossil power plant must have carbon capture on storage or carbon capture, utilization and storage, and conversion of diesel power plants into renewable energy power plants. Interconnection of transmission and smart grid electricity development is also one of our strategy. And then increase the use of electric vehicle in 2030 with 2 million of cars and 30 million of motorcycles. Our ambition target in renewable energy development comes along with some difficult challenges. One of major issues for renewable energy development in Indonesia is energy transformation will require large funding, incentive, improvement of support infrastructure, and human resource with high skill and competence. For the development of renewable energy project in the future, it is necessary to establish a business and funding scheme which involve the public and private sector. This is a vital moment for Indonesia transition toward a more sustainable and green future. We invite our national and international partners in supporting our effort through knowledge sharing, fostering strategic partnership both in the private and public sector, and widening the door for investors to develop renewable energy in Indonesia. Attracting investment from the other countries plays important role as well to support the renewable energy development, and Indonesia always open to opportunity for other countries investment, including Singapore. As for your information, on 12 July 2021, Indonesia and Singapore signed memorandum of understanding to build a floating photovoltaic system in Batam Island, Indonesia. The floating power system is projected to have a capacity of 900 megawatt peak, with some of the electricity generated will be exported to Singapore. In addition, the others also institution, BP Batam, has also signed an MOU with Sunship Singapore to build 2.2 gigawatt floating power plant in Duriangkang Lake, Batam. So as a closing, to conclude, Indonesia is committed to achieve the 23% new and renewable energy target by 2025 as a mandate by the national energy policy as well as Paris Agreement. Furthermore, the government will take systematic and massive effort in order to achieve sustainable low carbon development by 2050. Effort towards energy transformation will prioritize national interests while taking into account the availability, accessibility, affordability, sustainability, and competitiveness of the energy source. Policy improvement will be the key success factor to enable the acceleration of energy transition, including but not limited to the new renewable energy law that we are now preparing, presidential regulation of renewable energy purchasing by PLN that already drafting and waiting for the sign from the president, and other related implementation policy. I do sincerely hope that this event will be useful in our step in facing various challenges in energy transition issue and net zero emission target. I hope we can strengthen relationship and coordination among relevant stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Park. Very important sharing, and as we speak, there is so much happening between our two countries, and we can build a lot further on it. I was told by Ambassador yesterday that the meeting between the two leaders will be happening in Bintan, Batam soon, in the last quarter. So I'm sure that's also going to spill more cooperation between the two countries. Now, without further ado, I'll pass the stage to our moderator, Yuan Lin, and the floor is yours, and the most important segment of this whole conversation. Yuan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Namita. Firstly, I'd like to thank Your Excellencies and Bach for what you shared, because there's a part of me that looks at the challenge and goes, it is overwhelming. And then when I hear the sorts of things that each of the countries are able to do, I have hope again that things can happen. So it's the first time I've been able to say this. Hi, Commissioner Will Hodgman. Such a hoot, isn't it? And I'm so delighted that Tasmania is the one that's showing Australia it is entirely possible, and that it takes commitment and it's doable and it's done. So, you know, get on with it. But it doesn't say it's easy. You know, I know it wasn't easy. And quick tourist plug, because, you know, unofficially, I like to say that, you know, I represent, you know, the Tasmanian business development arm. Do go to Tasmania. The air, you land at the airport and you breathe, and it's something like your lungs open up. It is spectacular. I could say that because I'm a native. So, Will, the tough question for countries like Australia, though, is while we have a pathway, we have a genuine economic challenge of a significant part of our economy tied into fossil fuels. And we have this goal of going green globally. So then they are not necessarily simple to reconcile. So with the EU showing up, say, for example, now of saying countries or products that have a high carbon footprint through their value chain are going to face more challenges in being able to go into markets. You know, concretely, how does a country address, you know, the genuine economic interests of an embedded carbon intensive energy sector with the need to go green?
Yeah, there's no doubt that economic imperatives are undeniable and unavoidable, but also, in my view, very much a critical part of the solution and the way forward when it comes to technical capability, reducing cost, and therefore, most importantly, increasing demand and adoption. And if I might, to show that I'm not totally biased to the state we love, use another Australian state as an example, Australia's largest, New South Wales, which very clearly in its national plan, its net zero plan rather, identifies the #1 trend in driving climate change action is the global demand for low emissions products and services. And without wanting to get into how Australia's federation works, needless to say, the national and combined effort is very much also driven by Australian states and territories. So in New South Wales' case, part of their plan is to remove barriers to entry for business looking to innovate, as well as helping businesses themselves, of course, to reduce their impact. The New South Wales government would seek to co-invest with business to financially defray upfront costs, which are often an impediment to the take-up of technology, particularly new technology, such as with the case of electric vehicles, for instance. They want to supply consumers with more information so that they can make their own informed decisions about products and services that are sustainable, and the government itself wants to lead by example by being accountable for doing the same thing. So this is just one example, and each Australian state and territory similarly has the same goals and objectives and its own climate change plans in place. But Australia's national plan is similarly disposed. In fact, for them to drive down the cost of low emissions is very much central to our prospects for success in order to accelerate the deployment of renewables into the future. And in Australia, there has been, as I said, an enormous uptake in renewables in just recent years. And whilst around 50% by 2025 in renewable energy generation is far from the ideal, or indeed our ambition. That's literally a doubling in just recent years of renewable deployment. So what the national government is also importantly doing is investing significantly in R&D, in science, in innovation to increase our technical capabilities as well in a range of areas, most notably hydrogen under a new national hydrogen action plan announced by the government. And the last point I do want to make in terms of what we can do that is concrete in terms of driving down emissions and increasing resilience and also capability is to recognise that we must do more than just encourage developed countries to take greater action when, of course, it is developing countries that will be the largest producers of CO2 emissions in coming years. So a major focus for the Australian government is also to work very closely and collaboratively with countries in our region to support them to achieve their own climate change resilience and capability and to reduce emissions. And for example, we recently established what is a $2 billion financing fund that's available to countries in the Pacific and Southeast Asia, and it's supporting a solar plant in Papua New Guinea or a hydro power scheme in the Solomon Islands. So this is very real, practical application of expertise and also the financial need for projects of that size in jurisdictions where it's not so easy. So I think there are a number of ways that collectively we can make advancements. It's not dissimilar to the approach that's been taken in New South Wales and indeed was done in my home state where success was achieved. So I think it's a good model to follow.
Yeah, it sounds like one of the contributing factors. Thank you very much for that, because as you say, you know, Australia's got its own unique trans-governmental system and the federal structure, which is something we know and love. One of the things that struck me with what you said, and I'm going to just lodge it for the broader conversation, then move on to the ambassador from Chile, another country that I want to get to, was the place that you said about regulation, about the commitment in regulation and what that did. I'm just going to note that as a placeholder, because that was something that in Tasmania made a significant difference that you identified. But Ambassador Ignacio, so gorgeous to have you here. Thank you for being here. And what struck me when we were talking the other day, and indeed in what you were sharing, is just the sheer diversity of geographies and geologies that you have, and how 20 years ago they would have been considered almost interesting tourist places, but not economic places. And yet now these regions are actually have the capacity to create such significant economic value and global value. It's such a shift. And I have to say, getting across to Chile and seeing these parts of the country is on my bucket list for when we're allowed to travel. May it happen soon. But in working your way through all this one, because it's huge, what challenges does it bring when you have such diversity to actually being able to take on, and what can other people learn from the progress you guys are already making to help them accelerate?
Well, yeah, I agree with you, Joanne. It's a very long and thin country. It's something like 4,000 kilometers long. And we stretch from a desert, super dry desert in the north. It never rains there, never.
Wow.
In years. And south is like, well, close to the Antarctica. It's super rainy, cold, freezing cold, snow, bit unpleasant for human beings. So you'll see llamas and other types of animals, alpacas by the hundred. It's a difficult country to manage because of this crazy geography and being so close to the ocean. The country, it's something like 200 kilometers in wide. So there's not much space to accommodate things. And because of this very being so thin, And we have the Andes in one side and the ocean in the other hand. So it's difficult to manage the territory. And because of that, we are super exposed to climate change. And the ocean is rising, and you see normally nowadays floods. And of course, there's a drought in the country. It's been quite long now. I think it's 10 years long, non-stop for 10 years. And the south used to be green. It's not that green anymore because of arable land is receding a little bit. And you know, we rely a lot on agriculture. We export a lot of fresh fruit to other countries, say China. We are happy to selling cherries to China and fresh salmon too. So the global warming poses a challenge to the country in terms of the economy, and the destruction of infrastructure, ports, say, for instance. And that's why we are fully aligned with Paris Agreement 2030. And that's why we are in the process of installing these solar plants in the north of the country, taking advantage of the sun. There's some geothermal power towards south. And in the south is basically hydropower and wind, plenty of wind. So the government convened a group of experts, and they work on this plan, this strategy for a couple of years, and they came up with a great project, I suppose. And it is in force now. We have a number of companies installing their solar power plants in the north and the wind plants in the south. The one in the south is about to start commencing operations because they will produce ammonia. Ammonia, it's much easy to produce and export. So the first stage is ammonia and then green hydrogen. But it's going to take place in time. But that's basically, I like to say regarding to your question. Another important factor when it comes to countries like Chile, we are really open to foreign investment. An example, BHP Billiton runs one of the largest copper mines in the world in the country, north of the country. And it's not only our natural advantages selling fresh fruit or salmon to countries, but it's an attractive place to put your money, to your investment, because of the stability, the proper functioning of our democracy, the quality and transparency of our public policies, and the national treatment. This is very important. I think it's a key thing. The national treatment of ownership and justice, where foreign and local individuals or enterprises stand equal. So there's no differences between local and foreign. We started long ago in this line of work, and it's been quite successful in the last 30, 40 years. The country changed dramatically. And now at the present time, we are embarked in a sort of institutional and democratic renewal through the process of drafting a new constitution. So the outcome, it could be something like 1 or 2 years more. This will modernize our democracy and our political institutions. So in the meantime, the government is accelerating the process, moving the economy from fossil fuels to new green technologies, new green fuels.
Wow, it's a huge challenge, but also what I do hear in your voice is massive opportunity. And sorry, my inner business person going, huge competitive advantage that you also have, which is massive. One of the things I take out listening to what you've just said is that as a country, you've had a long-term investment in good governance. That is an asset that is being able to come into play now.
Yes, you're right. You're right, Joanne. And when the government at the time, 1976, something like that, decided to open the economy, they opened the country without reservations. So for the good and for the bad too. And the foreign companies start investing in Chile. There's a number of Australian companies doing business in Chile, New Zealand too, in the dairy sector, and the Australian companies are in the mining, most of them in the mining services. Canada, US, Japan, that we've been, in a way, it's like flattering myself. We've been successful in this. So we open the country to business and investments, and we assure that the investors that their investments and their assets in the country are safe.
It's something that, you know, one of the threads I'm seeing is it's something that takes such commitment and courage to do. The courage to make this decision, and then the commitment to hold through, because there are challenges to these sorts of things.
Yes, yes.
You know,
Joanne,
huge respect for that.
That's right. And all of that, Joanne, it's in black and white. We have signed so many free trade agreements with so many different countries, Australia including. So when we signed the free trade agreement with Australia was, I think, most comprehensive than the one we signed with the US. I was Consul General in Melbourne at the time, so I traveled to Canberra to assist the signing of the documents. And I still remember in the speeches, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of both countries talking about this document. So this is not just air. So this network of agreements we have signed with Japan, you name it, many countries, European Union, Canada, US. So in part of the agreements, there's a part related to investments. So it's in writing. So we secure your investment and we put it in writing and we sign it.
Wow.
And it's a legal document.
There's a very interesting thread that's coming through in this conversation. And, you know, thank you very much for sharing it, because it makes a huge, it's the invisible piece that creates the part of creating the powerful change. It's not just the technology itself. It's these other layers that also have such a massive value. You know, and there's a thread that's come through what you shared and also, you know, what Will shared. So what I might do is move across to Indonesia and explore, because again, a country with another set of challenges. This is the one thing right now, isn't it? It's like we can learn from each other, but our solutions are going to have to work through slightly differently, but there's meta practices that can help. It's complex. But Krishna, the question I'd like to advance with you here is that, you know, we've spoken a lot about energy and sustainability, but one of the other challenges, and it's something that I appreciate significantly in Indonesia. As a child, I lived in the Philippines, and just the complexity of managing something across 6,000 inhabited islands is a level of complexity that nobody else has, but it's the reality that Indonesia faces. How are you seeing being able to roll out and create this change when you've got food security, ocean health, energy, all mixed in? What can people learn from how you are addressing this complex?
Thank you, Joanne. So as the largest archipelagic country in the world, Indonesia has expanses of the sea covering an area of 6.4 million square kilometers, or 70% of its total area. The Indonesia Sea has a great maritime potential. Indonesia marine resources are not only in the form of fish, but also mining materials and others. The magnitude of the marine potential must also be supported by marine conservation efforts. So there are several problems in the marine conservation efforts, such as the use of fishing gear that is not environmentally friendly, and there is also plastic waste that is thrown in the river, which reach the sea. So in this case, the government Indonesia has taken steps to conserve the sea by banning the use of non-environmentally friendly fishing gear, reducing the use of the plastic. So in the addition to storing large natural resources potential, the vastness of Indonesia's seas is also an obstacle in equitable development for areas located on small islands, such as in transportations of food and fuel to these areas, which are heavily affected by sea condition. When the sea weather is not good, then the delivery is hampered. To improve the logistic transportation process in Indonesia, the government Indonesia has a sea highway connectivity program. So perhaps maybe you're already aware, this program is carried out by building or increasing port capacity. Until 2021, the sea highway program has involved 106 ports consisting of 6 base ports and 197 stopover ports. With this sea highway connectivity program, it will be facilitate logistic transportation to all parts of Indonesia. And regarding providing energy supply for the people living in the scattered island and remote island, on the energy supply side, as for your information, as of December 2020, Indonesia electrification ratio is 99.3%. Many efforts have been made to achieve this. The 100% electrification ratio targets, basically for areas located on small islands, such as the construction of diesel power plant, centralized solar power plant, and scattered solar power plants. However, to support Indonesia's commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emission, diesel power plants that have been built will be converted into renewable energy resource-based power plant, such as a centralized solar power plant with batteries. With the utilization of the centralized solar power plant, electricity supply will not be disturbed by the problem of fuel transportation, which are affected by sea condition. The provision of electrification access for areas located on small island will be able to support the economic growth of the local communities, because electricity can be used for cold storage of any other form that support local economies and productivities. That's my answer to your question.
Wonderful, thank you. Because it's, you know, at the bottom, you know, at the hub of what all this is about is creating good lives and livelihoods for people across each of our countries. And, you know, and then from there, everything else comes. Yes. So thank you very, very much for sharing it, because it is just a very different complexity that your country faces in moving through this. Now, I'm just slightly mindful of the time. Johan, did you have some thoughts to wrap the panel up?
Indeed, thank you, Johan. Your Excellencies, ladies and gents, yes, for the interest of time, or for the sake of time, allow me just a minute or two to consolidate a few points. It's clear from the speakers that climate change is an emergency and a challenge. I think there's no uncertainty as far as that is concerned. Renewable energy is clearly a major factor to reduce emissions and to move towards zero net emissions, which is doable given what the examples that we've heard. What is important in this regard is that we do not just talk about it, but that implementation and action is crucial. As they say, talk is cheap, but money buys the whiskey. Collaboration with other countries are important, as is public-private partnership, the concept thereof, involving the private sector. Johan referred to the business opportunity behind it, and the speakers did refer to the importance of foreign investments to develop infrastructure and make this a practical perspective. The ambassador has referred to heavy investments. Efficiency and affordability, crucial aspects. We need to strive towards lower cost, bringing that to fruition. Coal is clearly on the way out, in the sense that that it is obviously a dirty energy form. We are also finding that some financial institutions have started to withhold investments in coal-fired or fossil fuel plants. And we will then also see a transition, the principle from fossil fuel to renewable energy over a period of time. That is in essence the main factor that I've taken out. There's wonderful examples, rich examples that the panel members have mentioned, but I think I will stand with those. Thanks, Jane.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for your genuine and deep contributions to the discussion, and for demonstrating that hope is actually incredibly reasonable. I think that's important. Over to you, Nomita.
Thank you very much. That was very informative, and we are a bit behind schedule. So we were going to have a break, but I think I have to cancel the break. So we'll start with the second panel because I know everybody is busy and we can't hold everyone here. So I would like to introduce the second panel, which is on supply chain and sustainable business. And in this we have three speakers: the High Commissioner of South Africa, His Excellency Modise Mokgatlane, Dr. Christopher Stewart, Chief Sustainability Officer, ROLAM, and Esther Ann, Chief Sustainability Officer, CDL. And first of all, our first speaker, I would like to invite His Excellency Modise Mokgatlane, the High Commissioner of South Africa. He's also the Dean of African Group in Singapore. Prior to his appointment here, His Excellency served as a member of the National Assembly. Today, His Excellency will reflect on what are the challenges and opportunities facing the continent of Africa in implementing sustainability policies and practices. Your Excellency, the floor is yours, and please let us know what's happening at your end part of this conversation.
Excellency, sorry, you're still muted.
And we wish to hear your voice and insight.
Okay. No, I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
Program Director Nomita Da. Let's express our appreciation for the invitation to come and participate in this discussion or in this dialogue. May I recognize the excellencies, my colleagues. May I also recognize the moderators who are here and recognize everybody worth recognizing who's in attendance in this meeting. I will focus a little bit more on my country, South Africa, but I will start by saying, Chairperson, that the African Union heads of state and government endorsed the Africa Renewal Energy Initiative, which was launched at the COP21 in Paris in 2016. The adoption wanted to achieve two things. One, to help achieve sustainable development, enhanced well-being, and sound economic development by ensuring universal access to sufficient amount of clean, appropriate, and affordable energy. The second was to help African countries leapfrog to renewable energy systems that support their low carbon development strategies whilst enhancing economic and energy security. The Paris Agreement, Agenda 2030, and its linked sustainable development goals rightly set the target of sustainability, substantially increasing the share of renewable energy and doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency by 2030. Meeting this target and successfully implementing the Paris Agreement require all countries to undertake a transition towards green energy. South Africa at this moment relies mostly for its energy needs on coal-fired power plants. This places the country among the world's top carbon emitters and impacts on sustainability and the health of the communities. The country has also struggled to maintain a stable energy supply since the year 2007. Power cuts have actually become a regular feature of our South African life. There is a broad acknowledgement in South Africa about the need to move rapidly towards the energy transition and ensure increased utilization of renewable energy. The focus of the South African government, informed by the dire need of a reliable and secure energy supply, and its responsibility to make its humble contribution to the effort of COP21, has prioritized green energy supply. This will enable the country to tackle the negative growth spiral currently visiting the country. A developmental policy priority is therefore a transition from highly centralized energy production that depends on diminishing reserves of fossil fuels towards decentralized production of renewable and clean energy. As part of the economic recovery plan of the country, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced in October 2020 that 11,800 megawatts of energy would be added to the grid by 2022, with more than half coming from renewable energy. The president said that the implementation of the country's integrated resource plan would be accelerated with increases in the generation of energy via renewable energy, battery storage, and gas technology. Power will be produced from a range of renewable energy sources, including solar power, liquefied natural gas, wind and battery storage solutions, which will partly assist in addressing South Africa's power supply challenges and aid in diversifying its power supply and help to address climate change. The South African National Energy Association recently noted in the South African Energy Risk Report of 2020 that clean energy could aid in South Africa's economic recovery post the pandemic. In this regard, the government has since introduced the South African Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Procurement Program, a competitive tender process that was designed to facilitate private sector investment into grid-connected renewable energy generation in South Africa. The Renewables program, which is seen as an example for other African countries, has resulted in over 6,000 megawatts of generation capacity being allocated to bidders across a variety of technologies, principally in wind and solar. The announcement last of 8 successful bids and the opening of bids for the 5th round of the REIPP is a long-awaited step in the direction in our endeavor to contribute to protecting the environment. Concerns about climate change have led to a need to reduce greenhouse emissions significantly, and the transport sector is not excluded from this. To meet emissions reduction targets, it is likely that consideration will need to be given to changing the way we transport ourselves and the goods, which may include encouraging modal shift towards modes with a lower environmental impact. In South Africa, the transport sector is the most rapidly growing source of greenhouse gas emissions, and its continuous growth is expected to have an increasing impact on biodiversity, air quality, land resources, and water quality. It accounts for 10.8% of emissions in the country, with road transport responsible for 91.2%. South Africa has launched the country's first green transport strategy in June 2019 to promote a transport system that is environmentally friendly and help boost the economic growth and create jobs. The strategy will inter alia enable the transport sector to contribute its fair share to national efforts to combat climate, and also to help in develop policies that promote energy efficiency and emission control measures in all transport modes. Shifting from road to electric rail transport has the potential under the right circumstances to provide a cost-effective freight transport option while making the economy more efficient. The opportunities for shifting freight movements from road to rail along corridors are substantial, and hence the South African Department of Environmental Affairs saw a need to commission a study which is aimed at investigating the impact of a road to rail shift. In the search for sustenance on the planet Earth and human sustainability, South Africa will surely take some leads from a number of countries which have actually gone great strides, like Singapore and some of the countries which my colleagues currently have been speaking about. Road transport is the dominant mode of transport for overland movement of trade traffic in Africa, carrying more than 80% of trade on the continent. To be competitive at the global level, Africa must be able to move goods on the continent to and from other regions at the same speed or better than the other regions. The cost and quality of road transport services is of critical importance to trade competitiveness. It is no secret that the availability of adequate transportation facilities remains one of the biggest potential facilitators of the success or otherwise of Africa continental free trade area. There is the unavoidable need to ensure that the conducive, convenient, and smooth means and medium of transporting goods and services across Africa became or remains something we are continuously seized with. Carbon neutrality is also vital if we want to stop and prevent climate change. When we overload the atmosphere with bad chemicals, it can't function properly. And so the air begins to heat up. Carbon neutrality provides accountability for entities, organizations, and individuals. Humans are the cause of this environmental damage, so it is our responsibility to take action and undo the damage. If we do our part and strive for carbon neutrality, we know we are living our lives in a sustainable way. In conclusion, Chairperson, I wish to reaffirm South Africa's resolute support to all initiatives in the various world formations aimed at accelerating green towards collaborative action. I thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you very much for your valuable sharing. Africa is a continent nobody can ignore. There are so many things that can be done between Asia and Africa, and especially with sustainability in our minds, it is for us to see what are the projects we want to take up together, and we can work together towards accelerating green. Thank you very much for your valuable time. Now, it is my honor to welcome our second speaker for the panel, Dr. Christopher Stewart, who is the Global Head of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability, Olam International. Olam International is a leading food and agribusiness with customers in over 60 countries, with a sourcing network of an estimated 5 million farmers, the vast majority of which are smallholders in developing countries. Today, Christopher will share insights and challenges to address in the food sector, which is their forte, its supply chain and sustainability. Dr. Stewart, a very warm welcome. Thank you for taking our time, and we are all ears to listen to what Olam is doing and how others can learn. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Nomita, and thank you again for the invitation to attend this high-level event. I'm going to take a little bit of a different sort of tack to some of the other speakers. We're a food and farming company. We provide, we source, we trade something like 37 million tons of food products across 45 different product categories. Everything from your favorite indulgent ingredients, including cocoa and coffee, to global agri-staples such as grains and rice, cotton. We manage our own large-scale farms, including palm oil, coffee, large-scale timber concessions, but we also source, as you said, from a very vast network of smallholder farmers. We also link Africa and Asia. We are a Singapore-based company, but we had our origins in Africa, and we are very strong in Africa. We started in Nigeria 30 years ago with a cashew trading company. Nigeria remains one of our biggest origins, but we are present across all of the major food-producing countries. I was asked to talk a little bit about the circular economy in supply chains, and I'm going to start really with what is, the original circular economy, which is the one that nature invented some 400 million years ago, which is soil. So I don't know if you know the word petrichor. Some of you who visited London would know that as a very posh London restaurant, but in fact petrichor is the smell of the soil after rain, and it literally means from the Greek the divine essence of earth. And it's a clue to our senses that soil is actually a magic substance. It's really it's a living thing in its own right. Every handful of soil contains something like 10,000 different species of microbes, dozens of species of insects and worms. It may contain up to 50 kilometers of fungal threads and hyphae binding it all together. And this collective living organism is the original circular economy. It takes all of the plant matter and leaves and wood and animals and everything that falls onto the soil, and through this magical alchemy of the soil, turns it into fertility, and it recycles everything. So soil and plants are a circular system of their own. And it's at the source, obviously, soil is fundamental to growing food. And it's also fundamental to the climate. The soil is a kind of hidden giant of climate change. It is by far the biggest stock of carbon on the earth, other than the ocean. far greater in terms of carbon stock than all of the forests of the world combined. And yet it's very much hidden from us. We have derogatory words for soil such as muck and dirt and mud. But really, this is a magic substance which is hidden from us. And in order to solve our climate issues, we actually need to learn how to speak the language of soils and to nurture soils and work with the people who depend on soils directly for their livelihoods, which is what OLAM does. We work very closely with our networks of farmers, and in many of our products, we are working directly with farmers and farmer groups to help them and support them take care of their soils, to take care of their production, the quality of their product, and therefore their livelihoods. We have a huge challenge, obviously, with smallholder farmers, particularly in developing countries, in that those farmers are often very poor. They're often the poorest of the poor. They lack access to education, finance, input, materials, labor, and everything that they would need to improve their own livelihoods. And OLAM and many other companies, but speaking for ourselves, we provide direct support for about 770,000 smallholder farmers across many products, and in that capacity, so we provide good agricultural practice training. We'll provide them with inputs, better seeds, better planting materials, and therefore help them to increase their yields, the quality of their products, and therefore their ability not just to put shoes on the feet of their children, but also to invest in their own farm and to reduce the impact that they're having. Now, why do we talk about impact, and why am I talking about soils? Is because in fact soils are an irreplaceable resource. It takes hundreds or thousands of years for soils to form, and yet we are treating it as a disposable commodity. The figures are absolutely mind-boggling. We are losing something like 43 billion tons a year of topsoils, of agricultural soils. Half of all of the erosion happening on the planet today is due to agriculture. And this is not something that can be easily reversed in our lifetimes. 43 billion tons is an unimaginable number, but if you imagine a cube of topsoil, fertile topsoil, 3.5 kilometers on a side, that's how much we are throwing away every year through bad agricultural practices or poor soil conservation. And all of that soil is going into rivers, into lakes, and ends up in the sea, choking coral reefs and damaging fisheries. So it's a big loss. So what can we do to reverse this? We need to address this soils issue. Farming and agriculture is at the center of our climate change crisis. So the first thing that we need to do is to measure the impact that we are having as agricultural supply chains, and that means having the right set of metrics and standards to understand what's happening at the source. And that's why OLAM brought in our sustainability platform AppSource, which is a kind of toolkit of metrics and key performance indicators tailored for the farms and the farmers, which measures the impact at the source and provides our customers with a detailed agricultural and climate footprint of the food. The second is bringing in regenerative agricultural practices. And these are, this is not rocket science, they're well known, but it's around better crop varieties, soil erosion control, fertilizer management, because over-fertilizing soils is extremely bad for their fertility over time, mulching, residue management, and recycling of agricultural waste materials, including bioenergy, which is a very important source of heat for processing, for instance. It's also about putting more trees on farms where we can, so using tree crops to produce more food, and that's something that OLAM does with many of our tree crops, cocoa, coffee, edible nuts of various sorts, and also working with farmers and with partners to keep more trees in landscapes, because, as I said, soil and the agricultural system is not just what happens on the farm, it's what happens in water catchments. So protecting water catchments, working with conservation organizations on forest protection, working with national governments, in fact, also on things like land use planning, so that we can design sustainable landscapes for the long term. And this is something that we've done with some success in some of our African origins, notably with the government of Gabon, with our palm oil plantations, working to design in ecological principles into new generation plantations that are climate positive, i.e. they draw down overall more greenhouse gases than they emit. The third thing that we need to do is really change the way that value is returned to the farmers. So most of the value in food systems is concentrated at the downstream end, obviously with the retailers and the brands. Very little of that actual value in many of our commodities ends back with the farmers. So we need to find new ways of returning value to the farmers so that they are incentivized to apply these good agricultural practices. Because obviously it has to make sense economically for the farmers to do all of these regenerative agricultural practices. If they're not incentivized to do it, or if it doesn't bring better return on their investment, then simply they won't do it. So that's really about finding new pathways to return value to the farmers. And the fourth thing I think is, and this is very evident in places like Singapore, where millennials really want to know where their food is coming from. We need to enhance the way that consumers connect with their food. People really love food. It's really kind of a way to their hearts. They really don't like to be involved in food that damages the planet. We are seeing that very strongly coming through from the new generation that is concerned with their planet, and that's about providing the consumers and through the manufacturers and brands, providing the consumers with information about where their food comes from, provenance and traceability, but also the impact that makes, and the story of their food. And that is something now with all of the digital technology that we have that we can provide in really compelling ways. And that's really my ambition, is to help consumers understand where their food is coming from and engage with the brands that they buy and choose to have a positive impact on the planet. And through all of these interventions, we can ensure that that farmers make a better living, that rural livelihoods are upkept, that rural communities can thrive, and we can prove that through at least some really inspiring case studies around the world, that we can replicate that feeding the planet doesn't need to cost the earth. And I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stewart. I could smell the earth, and I had no doubt that Mother Earth needs protection and needs to be revered by all of us. But today you've given me a new perspective of how valuable resource Earth is, and through our conversations in future also, we would like to generate more public opinion and more information on how people can use Earth to stop the damage of Mother Earth as we have caused. And you from Olam, you have been in so many countries and you are walking the talk, and I'm sure this information is very valuable for all the panelists here. And I'm hopeful that the markets where Olam is not present right now, with this kind of an interaction, you are able to share your best practices so that farmers get properly paid, they have right kind of training. You as a big company are able to spend some money on R&D. So all these practices, if we work collectively with no borders and world as one country, I'm sure we can accelerate green. And I'm very thankful for your sharing. Now I will go on to my third speaker for this. Third speaker is someone I call Singapore's sustainability queen. And this is Esther Ann. She is from City Development Limited, a veteran and advocate for green building and sustainability. Esther was instrumental in establishing CDL's leadership in sustainability. CDL is ranked in the 2021 Global 100 Most Sustainable Corporations in the World. A forerunner in embracing the UN SDGs, Esther was conferred 2018 SDG Pioneer for Green Infrastructure and a Low Carbon Economy by the UN. Now, I don't call her sustainability queen for nothing. with all these accolades, I'm sure she has wonderful sharing for all of us, for us all to learn, because she has been walking the talk for many years now. Over to you, Esther. Tell us your story and let's all accelerate green.
That's very, very kind of you. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's like food, you know, everyone live, work, and entertain in a property. And studies show that actually in average, people spend about 90% indoor. So home, office space, and entertainment space can make a huge difference to green the environment. And I really like today's topic, how do we accelerate green towards a collaborative action? So how can businesses, especially in the real estate sector, to help promote, you know, achieve a sustainable cities and communities are very, very important. As we all know that, you know, the world was really occupied to fight climate change last year, the pandemic last year, but climate change has not, you know, lose, you know, the attention. And in fact, at World Economic Forum in January this year, the top global experts and decision makers still voted, you know, the top 10 risks, you know, including 5 climate related. And of course, to no surprise, infectious disease is number 1. But look at the green dots, you know, climate action failure, biodiversity loss, natural resource, you know, crisis, or human environmental damage and extreme weathers are considered as top business risk, investment risk, and also risk against, you know, humanity as well. But you know, while we were really, you know, being locked down last year, and one aspect that really has grown really fast, you know, was actually sustainability, and we actually called it a year of awakening. And you can really see a lot of action, you know, whether it is on the political, you know, international level or national level, and even business level. And we can hear, you know, race to zero almost every day on the media. And we can hear, you know, the COP26, now we're stepping up, you know, for more than almost like the last few months, and they're very near to the finishing line in November. And we can hear that, you know, European Green Deal, and now that American is back, you know, in the game, you know, Paris Agreement. And, you know, you hear a lot of such, you know, climate goals and also action and sustainability reporting. I think one area that it is very, very strong is like, investors has never been, you know, speaking louder, you know, that they expect investing companies to, you know, put ESG as top priority. Otherwise, you will, you know, companies may lose, you know, the you know, investors. And in last year, ESG funds have almost tripled, and sustainability and the social bond has doubled. So how do we green and accelerate the, you know, the green movement and green action? And how do we mitigate and adapt, you know, to climate risk are very, very important. In Singapore, we are faced with really many challenges. We are very, very small country, you know, lack of, you know, natural resources, and we also lack of land and all, and we are also subject to flood and rising sea levels. We are next to the, you know, equator. Heat is really something that it is a challenge. So how do we, you know, tap onto resources, innovative solutions to help us fight climate change is very, very important. And we definitely cannot do it alone, you know, not the government alone, not businesses alone, not people or NGO alone. So we definitely need to bring everybody together, bring idea and actions together to close the resource loop, you know, to reset our energy, to secure water supply, to achieve net zero, you know, in terms of carbon and also waste reduction as well. So just give a little bit of background about City Developments Limited. We are a private company listed in Singapore, and we were established in 1963 with only 8 employees. And today we are operating in 29 countries and regions. And our core businesses, including building residential home, that is our major, you know, core activities. And we are also a key landlord in Singapore, and with 23 million square feet of commercial space, mostly office space, and also, you know, retail space as well. We have a global footprint of 150 hotels, and over the last few years, we have actually built up a fund management arms as well. So we know that we are in the positions to drive change, because Cities account for 70% of greenhouse gas emission globally, including about 40% generated from buildings and also construction activities. So how we design, build, and manage our buildings, and how we engage our building users, including the home buyers and the tenants and the building users, will make a huge difference to the global carbon footprint. So this is actually a value creation business models we have developed over the last 2.5 decades. In the core of it, in 1995, we have actually established an ethos that is conserving as we construct. And at that time, of course, in this part of the world, nobody really talks too much about climate change or global warming, and sustainability was not quite an agenda. Don't talk about in the 90s, even in 2000s, nobody really give much attention to sustainability. But after Paris Agreement, we have seen change and steadily, but slowly, and only last year we've really seen the tipping point, and every aspect of the whole value chain, whether it is the political leader, business leaders, NGOs, and consumers, are all talking about sustainability. And how do we embrace it and gather more momentum and the value chain to action together that will make a difference. And of course, as a builder, as a landlord, green building performance, low carbon performance is actually very, very top priority for us. And of course, SDG, after when it was launched in 2015, we started to embrace it. Started with 9 goals in 2016, and up to now we have actually embraced 14 SDGs already. And the key goals actually, of course, include climate action, green innovation, infrastructure, buildings, and one of my favorites is actually sustainable cities and communities. You can't do it alone. We are not just talking about building, the brick and mortar. We need to bring the communities and people together. And of course, Goal 17 partnership is huge, is very, very important. And of course, if I may just, summarize our ESG strategy, there are 4 pillars that we are looking at. We call it the 4I. The first one is integration. No companies can perform ESG effectively without integrating it into the whole corporate structure, the business operations. Every level must be aligned, and innovation is very important. Risk mitigation is a given, that adaptation will make a difference. And how do we tap onto technologies and solutions to fast track change for a low carbon and resilient future is very important. And investment, without fundings, without resources, we can't move the needle. So we have to really invest in where, what are the areas that it is important that will help us improve our ESG performance. And the impact is everything we do, we have, we create an impact, whether positive or negative. So we must track and measure impact against the set goals and targets and report it and communicate it. The 3 deliverable, we call it the 3D. The first one must, is decarbonization, because we have high environmental impact. Decarbonization has always been the top priority for us as a builder, as a building owner. And digitalization and innovation is key. Without technology and innovative solutions, we can't move the needle towards a net zero future. And disclosure communication is very important, because even you don't want to do it, investors will ask for it, your stakeholders will ask for it. And this is just a few key accomplishments that from the early 2000s until now, that of course green buildings, how do we green builder design build greener and also manage building in a more resource efficient way is very important. And for climate action, it is definitely not new to us. As far back as early 2000, we already built the first eco condominium in Singapore, and using solar energy to power its clubhouse. And of course, the scope and scale of using renewable has grown over the years. In 2009, we actually launched the very first carbon neutral development in Singapore, which is a commercial property. And up to now, it is still an carbon neutral property. And including our overall headquarter operations, we have started carbon neutralizing it since 2009 annually. And of course, green building is very important. Green Mark is the Singapore's national green building standard, which is actually like a tropical version, as compared to LEED. Net zero building. How do we build net zero building? It's really not easy, especially in the tropics. And we have actually two of the very few net zero building to our name. One is called CDL Green Gallery at the Singapore Botanic Gardens. And since it's opened in 2013, it's only powered by solar energy generated from the rooftop of this gallery. And similarly, in 2017, we opened the first Sustainability Academy, which is a hub to build capacity, knowledge, and network for SDG and climate action. It is also a net zero building since 2017. Every year we generate about 60,000 kilowatt hour, and we only use about 50,000 to operate the academy. So the excess, actually, we pump it back into the grid of the commercial property, the retail mall where this academy is located at. It's called the City Square Mall. And we continue to invest in R&D and work with our local university and also Sustainable Energy Research Institute. So in 2015, we have consolidated most of our green building and climate strategy, and we combined it into a climate change policies. And fast track to this year, we actually make the bold move to pledge our support of World Green Building Council's net zero carbon building commitment. By 2030, all our building that under our direct control and management will be net zero carbon in operations. Very tall orders. Without innovation, without technology, without best practices, and or engaging our stakeholders, it is hard to achieve it. So in order to really march towards the net zero, this is actually a chart for us to to illustrate how we actually engage the value chain from the first time, from the day we acquire the land. How do we design? How do we orientate the building to maximize ventilation and also maximize the use of light and all that, and so as to reduce the use of air condition and reduce the use of electricity is very important. And that is when we engage the regulator, landowner. And the second stage is, of course, we have to design it and also build it and plan it with our architect, with our engineer, with our main contractors, subcontractors. And of course, suppliers are very important. If we want to talk about embodied carbon, we need sustainable building materials. We need our building suppliers to be on board as well. And of course, in the end of the day, building users, whether you are tenants or your home buyers, will make a difference. So today we are all faced with climate, health, and social challenges. Business today is no longer just about business. We have to add purpose to the so-called the triple bottom line, which is have been around for the past 20 years already. Without a healthy planet, there's no healthy people or market for business to make a profit. So we need to look at all the three triple bottom line and adding purpose to it, because even you don't do it, the investors are asking for it. And this is the BlackRock's, message which is actually the largest asset manager in the world. So they believe that, the impact of companies have impact on the environment and society. And if they can align their business and operation with the UN SDG, and they will have the potential to become market leaders. And if not, they will face, more pressure from regulators and the reputational repercussion, and lose their investor and lose their consumers as well. So over the last 2.5 decade, we have actually built up very strong ESG commitment. And this is I always call it a report card that, we are included in the leading ESG ratings and rankings, and which we are very, very proud of. And this has become a very strong track record for us to gain access to sustainable finance and also fast-growing ESG investment funds and all that. And of course, we can't just talk about political leader, business leader. We need to talk about community. We need to nurture the future eco champions as well. So we also invest in community. For example, this is the first green library for children from 3 to 12 years old. It is called the My Tree House, and we partner with our builders together and build this, and it has actually become the world's first green library for kids. And we have a lot of events and activities that we engage youth, because they are the force for change. And community women, which is something I'm very proud of. We set up a Women for Green network, engaging women to drive change at work, at home, and at play. And we believe that with more people, more community on board, we can advance change, resilience for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Your PowerPoint was power-packed. We need a healthy planet for healthy people. I agree with you totally. Our little red dot is a beautiful laboratory. I hope nations which are developing can learn a lot from your sharing. And I hope this opens more doors for Singapore and CDL to share and expand to new markets. Stop practices which are detrimental to sustainability, and we are able to accelerate green together. Thank you for your sharing. Now, may I pass the mic to Mr. Johan Berger for question and answer session, and the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Namita. Your Excellency, Christopher, Esther, thank you. Those were all three wonderful presentations. Your Excellency, you sidestepped my questions that I had prepared in advance by answering or referring to the issues that I had in mind, i.e. the fact that we're looking at South Africa being a country with a very large footprint. You're looking at the province of Mpumalanga, which is massive, where the carbon footprint is massive. You referred to the move towards renewable energy. You referred to the move towards rail transport. And also the independent power producers looking and bringing on board the private sector to participate in this. So those are all very powerful points as far as South Africa is concerned, and I think we can also extrapolate them to the rest of Africa. When we do look at Africa, and you look at, for example, the African Continental Free Trade Area, intra-Africa trade is a big issue that hopefully the AfCFTA will be able to address in the sense that it would grow to a very large extent the aspect of intra-Africa trade. This, however, does lead to the aspect of an increase in carbon footprint. How do you think can the continent address this issue, growing on the one hand, growing the economy of Africa on the other hand, on the one hand, and then have a limitation on the carbon footprint on the other hand? Your Excellency? Namita?
You are muted, Excellency.
Yeah, no, I'm just unmuting myself here. Mr. Johan Berger, thank you very much for the question. I think the essence of the whole thing is there is no way at the present moment that Africa can avoid an easy way of transporting goods from one area to the other. If you look at the traffic congestions around, in fact, the Southern African Development SADC region, you will see that it's just tracking basically which is taking place. What needs to happen is to transform from that type of transporting goods, mainly to go to rail, but the rail also would need loads and loads of investment, particularly if you are going to have electric trains traveling between, in fact, the countries, but also to improve movement of cargo ships, because, you know, from other areas like Cape Town to Dar es Salaam or other places around Kenya and all that, there's no sufficient freight movement which is done through shipping. So in order to address the problem which inevitably is going to take place of using trucks, as trucks have been shown that they command 80% of transportation in Africa, we have to reduce at that level.
That's a bit of a concern. It's a major source of concern, Your Excellency, but I understand the point that you make. It is going to take time, and in the meantime, in the short and medium term, the focus will be on trucking, which obviously is not good for the climate and for the carbon footprint. We are seeing rail developments in Kenya and in Tanzania. South Africa has a rail system that needs attention. We're seeing that there's a problem as far as shipping products to the coastal regions, to the harbors are concerned. But I take your point. Your Excellency, a final question. I'd like to ask you many more questions, but in terms of renewable energy, South Africa has basically one renewable energy plant down in Cape Town. Africa has another one in Ethiopia specifically, where you have a waste to energy plant in Addis. Yet we're sitting with a scenario where waste is a major issue. Johannesburg, for example, is filling up its 7th landfill site and looking for more, and they're running out of options. Why are there so few waste to energy plants in Africa? And why do we only have one in South Africa? We have 60% of the continent is without access to energy, to electricity. We have lots of waste. Africa generates massive amounts of waste. Yet we only have one renewable energy plant in Cape Town, one in Addis, and they talk about Addis in Kenya and Nigeria, etc., but nothing at landscape. Why and how? How do we enhance, how do we increase the prevalence of this?
The question which you are asking, I think, is the question which has seized the people of South Africa in particular through their presentations and interventions with the Department of Environmental Affairs, because it's not only something that can add value to the fact of trying to reduce the destruction of earth, but it's something which can provide basic things like added employment, which is a big problem in our country. It is a point of discussion, but I must admit that it has not been elevated to the seriousness which it deserves within the context of what we are trying to fight. It will only need that there should be continuous agitation on the part of social formations in the various countries of Africa, because, as you say, it provides a lot of opportunities for us. I can't give you a definite answer, Mr. Johan Beggar.
Thank you, Your Excellency. You will still allow me back in the country when I go back?
Very willingly, because
no, I'm
we
just
know the value which you can add.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Christopher, I have a question, 2 questions for you, if you don't mind. On the one hand, Dr. Christopher Stewart, if we can just get him on.
Hello, I'm here.
Yeah, right, great. Christopher, deforestation is a challenge that is brought about, amongst others, by agriculture, not only, but also agriculture, development of agriculture, the growth of the agricultural footprint creates a big challenge as far as that concerned. To the extent that both Brazil and the DRC, Brazil being the largest lung of the globe, of the planet, and DRC being referred to as the second lung, they have stopped being actually fulfilling that function, to put it very briefly. How do we address this challenge that we have on the one hand a more modernized agricultural environment, a more productive, a more commercial oriented one, and yet also deal with in a meaningful way with the issue of deforestation? I know there are in Africa, for instance, various reforestation activities concerned. I just recently read about Ethiopia planting billions of trees, with even more envisaged for the next few years. And they've also gifted 1 billion trees to its neighbors. And you also have a project where they're looking at planting trees from the west coast of Africa right through to the east coast of Africa. These are wonderful examples, but are there enough? And if they are, great, it would be wonderful, which I doubt, but how do we increase this? How do we avoid the destruction of vital forests? That's the first question. The second question, you referred to, we must put value back to the smallholder farmer. I agree 100%. If we look, for example, at cocoa, and I've read recently coffee exactly the same, about 5 to 6% of the total value created in the value chain goes back to the countries where, for example, cocoa and coffee in Africa, I'm using Africa as an example, are produced. How do we make sure that that goes from 6 to 10 to 15 to 20%? When the price is increased, all that happens is that the other players downstream in the value chain, they score the benefit. As a chocolate sweet tooth myself, I would not mind paying more for my chocolate, provided I know that the smallholder farmer's share is increased. Some people look at the smallholder farmers that are producing these crops, and then they say, relative to the other farmers, they're quite well off, which I think is a very wrong argument, because in general, relative to what's happening in the rest, they are not well off at all. And the only way that they can adopt more meaningful agricultural processes and practices is by getting a greater slice of the pie. That's my second question. How do we do that?
Thank you, Johannes, for both your questions. So I'm a huge fan of trees. I'm a tropical ecologist by training, and I spent my student days studying tropical forests, and therefore introducing more trees into the landscape is something that I'm very passionate about. And I'm fortunate in working for Olam, working for a company that has a number of very important global tree crops, including, as I said, cocoa and coffee, but also various edible nuts, which are almost all tree crops. And with certain crops, we have, so cocoa and coffee are both shade trees, or shade bushes, you could say, and they thrive under a degree of shade, not too much shade, but enough to protect those bushes from full sun. And we can work with farmers to get more trees onto farms. So, for instance, we distributed last year something like 1.3 million useful trees to farmers in our own supply chains, in the farmers that we work directly with, and this is something that we do kind of year on year, helping those farmers not, to have useful trees on their farms other than the crop trees. So trees which will provide them with fruit, other income, timber, fodder, as well as this sort of carbon storage function. Obviously, not all crops are suited to this, but many crops can benefit from having trees on farm, including hedging, which is very beneficial, for instance, for polyculture, fodder for animals, which is very important in many tropical farming systems, where farmers grow a number of crops to hedge against one failure, and different crops provide money, food, and sort of important resources for the household. Beyond that, obviously, smallholders themselves are responsible for deforestation directly. And that's, they are cutting down forests in order to have access to fertile land in order to grow a crop and feed their families. And so helping those farmers to access land tenure and helping them to produce more on the land that they do farm is one way of stabilizing the landscape. And so we have been working in a number of places on establishing, for instance, in Ghana, land management boards that provide smallholders with security of land tenure and also implement the sorts of things I was talking about in terms of good agricultural practices and use on farms. And our ambition ultimately is to be able to supply our customers with a net zero food or very low carbon foodstuffs, which we can't achieve just on farms. We just can't get to net zero on farms because agriculture uses energy. Even tree agriculture uses energy. But by bringing down emissions on the farm and pairing the farming activities with beneficial restoration activities or protection activities in the same landscapes, we can get to net zero. I'm convinced of that. And we have some fantastic examples of that happening where, we treat the whole farming system and the water catchment areas and surrounding forests as a whole system, and our ambition is to be able to measure that and measure the benefit of the system as a whole. The second question, Johannes, would you just repeat?
Christopher, how do we ensure that the smallholder farmer gets a greater percentage, that the 6% becomes 16% of the total value?
Okay, so this is a tough problem to solve because obviously consumers largely buy on the basis of cost, and they have been used for decades to see food become cheaper and cheaper, and they are, the average spend in developed countries on the food basket is 10%, around 10% of the household budget. It's been dropping every decade since the 1950s and 60s, and people don't really want to pay very much more for their food. But we are seeing different ways of getting more value back to the farmers. So first of all, we need to ensure that the farmers are able to produce more and better quality, and that means helping them to get the access to finance and materials and inputs and so forth, so that they can actually increase their yield and quality, which will put more money in their pocket. The second thing is reducing food waste and post-harvest loss, and that's a very significant part of the actual potential income. So we've done some measurement, for instance, in our rice farms and our rice smallholder suppliers in Nigeria, where we've found that the farmers believe that they're losing something like 10% of their crop from threshing and harvesting waste. In fact, it's more like 30 to 35%, which is a massive loss for smallholder farmers. And yet with fairly simple mechanized reaping and threshing, which we've introduced, we can reduce those losses by more than half. And that represents an income per farmer, additional income of around $350 a year, which is pretty significant for these very poor farmers operating on 2 hectares of land. The final thing is that I think some countries now are recognizing that they need to intervene with regulation. And for instance, the governments of Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana have included now what they call the living income differential, which is effectively a levy on food, on cocoa rather, which is intended to go into a fund which would be then returned to the farmers. So that's in development, but we've already seen some pretty strong results from that in terms of farmers getting a better. So it's not just about sort of putting a label on it and selling it at a premium at the downstream end. There's a whole suite of interventions, and we, in the upstream, we have to be very innovative and creative in trying to maintain economic benefit for us as traders in a commoditized sector, but also nurturing and providing a living income to the farmers on whom we depend.
Right. Christopher, thank you for that. Esther, in interest of time, I have one question that I would like to ask you. Singapore, you based your presentation on Singapore. For me, Singapore is a great example of urban planning. It's a rich country with a GDP per capita that is one of the highest in the world. And I see it personally as a great example of urban planning, of action, of implementation. The Singaporeans don't just talk about something, they actually do something about something. In terms of urban development and housing, for example, most of your housing, if not all of them, financing is facilitated by the pension funds. Many developing countries, however, do not have this benefit. They do not have this luxury. How do we extrapolate the Singaporean example to other countries in developing countries, in the developing world? I'm also going to ask you if you can, and with that, also address the issue of, for example, WTE plants. I can remember 2015, I think it was your 6th plant that you were developing. And in 2018, I read an article where Singapore was developing a WTE plant that, apologies for that, a WTE plant that would be the largest in the world. Do you have advice for, and what kind of advice do you have for Africa's governments, for governments in developing worlds, as to how to aspire to this, towards this, and despite a lack of financing?
Well, okay, thank you. There are quite a few questions here. As an advocate of SDG, I always feel that this is really a very, very strong platform, because there are 17 goals, just behind me, you can see that. And that actually provides a lot of opportunities for investment. And how do you channel funds from, the rich economies and channel it to the, emerging markets? There are plenty. For example, some of our, neighboring countries that are still, have, a problem in accessing to clean water or energy. There are a lot. If I have the money, I would definitely pour my money, invest in, building solar plants and, and all. So I think for Singapore, we are a small country. We are also renewable energy challenged. And so what we need to look at is, of course, we invest in our people, our knowledge, and, as a hub, for best practices and all. And in fact, sustainable finance is really an enabler to bring funds to, for the emerging markets to, accelerate green movement, whether it is green building or, to tap into, renewable energy for waste reduction and all that. Because just now you talk about waste and, and we are private sector. I can't really answer for the government. And in most countries, WTE, which is waste to energy plants, are mainly, managed and invested by, government-led. Or in our case, we actually have the so-called GLC. GLC is a government-linked company. So this is an area that we're working on, but I think the more, even more critical area that the government has been really stepping up a lot, whether it is urban planning, whether it is, building sector, decarbonization is key. Because, we need to lower, we need to work towards a low carbon. And how do we do it while we are, very challenged with land scarcity? We don't have space, enough space to build solar plants. And then the other like wind and hydro are not really quite conducive in Singapore. So what do? We need to, just now one of the excellency also mentions that we are importing solar energy. And we have already signed MOU with, Australia and also Indonesia. And those are really our what we are working on. Like what your topic is talking about, this theme is like, how do we accelerate green, through collaboration? And if I can also share one last example as a public-private, collaboration. Food waste, that you are right, that it is one of our key waste stream in Singapore, because Singaporeans love to eat. That's what Christopher say. And there are a lot of food waste as well. So how do we, tackle food waste? One is we have to advise people, eat what you can, consume only what you need, don't, over consume and throw away food waste. This is one thing we are educating, the people. And then the second thing is, how do we reduce food waste, turn food waste into compost? So we have a partnership with, the National Environment Agency, started 2 years ago at our, service department, building in zinc grinder and then turning all the food waste into the, food digester, we call it, and turn food waste into compost to fertilize our plants and garden. So this is like a closed loop, a circular economy, approach that helps to, turn, waste, garbage into valuable fertilizer and compost. So I think, definitely through partnership, through ideas, through collaboration, we can green the cities.
Right. Thank you, Esther. Much appreciated. Joanne, over to you for your summary.
Wonderful. Thank all three of you, Ambassador, for putting the genuine challenges that we have on the table. That the truth is, in many parts of the world, trucks are the most practical way to get things around. And being able to deal with that has ramifications just not on the direct logistics footprint, but clearly also on the supply chain footprint and the farming footprint, which is where still a vast majority of people are part of the basic food production system. So thank you for putting that on the table. Dr. Stewart, thank you for putting on the table the very genuine challenge that if we don't address soil, we're going to be missing a very, very significant part and probably fundamentally won't achieve the bigger outcome. And that the invisible role of soil is huge. I grew up in Nigeria at an agricultural research station, so you brought that world back to me, and the power of intercropping. This capacity that I think the business world can also learn from, that you shared, of how multiple layers of the system can create together in the layers of the farming systems, but also the way that we need to be looking at the business system, which is what Esther so ably talked about with what she is seeing doing. It was a business example of the agricultural example that Dr. Stewart shared. And I think sort of like a distilling takeaway for people in here is actually some words that Esther used. She talked about why we need to be innovating, setting goals, measuring, digitizing, and disclosing. There were 4 P's that I thought were absolutely beautiful. We need to be putting it in practice. We need the policy. We need the pledge to do it and actually have a purpose. So thank all 3 of you for the very genuine, deep contributions that you have given to Accelerating Green.
Thank you, Joanne. And from my part as well, thank you for the panel members. That was very insightful to hear from you on your stories, wonderful, rich stories. And on that note, Nomita, back to you.
Thank you very much. After many, many years, I feel the pressure of almost writing an exam. I'm out of time and I don't know whether I'm the examiner or while I'm writing the paper. So I hope you understand my situation. The team outside keeps on showing me the watch and I don't know what to do. But this topic is so close to everyone's heart, you know, we could go on talking because there's a lot of work to do. So bear with me if we are a little, not little, very over time. And we'll manage it better next time, but we have a lot of conversations. So without talking anymore, I will go direct to panel 3, which is, we are going to talk about circular economy and thinking out the box. We have 3 speakers. We have His Excellency, Kakraman Shakirao, Ambassador of Uzbekistan in Singapore. He's a specialist in foreign economic relations. He's responsible for cooperation with Far East and Pacific Ocean countries and has facilitated implementing green projects in Uzbekistan with strategic partners. Today, His Excellency will enlighten us on integrating sustainable development goals into national and regional strategies and programs. His country is an ancient civilization, but it is rather a young nation of 30 years. So their challenges are different. Over to you, Excellency. The floor is yours, Ambassador.
Yeah. Hello. Can
Hello,
you hear
sir.
me?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. Hello. So good evening. So yes, thank you so much for this opportunity to attend this, I think, the very important event. And thank you, Madam Nomita, and the entire team of SunMedia in diplomacy to arranging this today's webinar. And just I would like to be quite short about the achievements of Uzbekistan towards these sustainable development goals. Just to inform you about what's going on in my country. So, of course, you know that like in other countries, of course, in my government also identified the 70 national goals and more than 100 tasks in the field of sustainable development up to the 2030s. And of course, we put these goals and trying to do our best to achieve those goals. And the adoption of the national goals and objectives for sustainable development of Uzbekistan for the period of 2030 created the basis for a new global partnership in order to increase the level of well-being based on the development of national standards for sustainable development and the harmonization of its economic, social, and environment aspects. I may tell you that Uzbekistan, on average, has about 80% of the best possible outcome for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals nowadays. The strengths of Uzbekistan in this implementation are that, like in Singapore, 97% of literacy rate, 100% of the population uses the basic level of sanitation services, the high level of satisfaction with public transport, and high level of safety. Uzbekistan, being a developing region in the world, has made great strides in the recent years in economic liberalization and transition into the market economy. Over the 2015 and 2020 years, our country achieved impressive success in implementing complex reforms aimed at economic growth. And over the starting from the 2017, Uzbekistan GDP growth in Uzbekistan was more than 5%. But in 2020, we just only 2020 was the challenging time for everyone, and we achieved only 1.6 GDP growth annually in this year. And due to these large-scale reforms in my country, which is implementing starting in 2016, since our second president came into force, and Uzbekistan gained 90 points in the World Bank assessment doing business. And nowadays we stands on the 69 the place in 2020. Reforms to build a successfully functioning the market economy, improve business climate and banking, financial and energy sectors in the field of land use and agriculture will contribute to the growth to private investment and creation of additional jobs, in particular for young people. Just as an example of our reforms as outcomes, what we achieve nowadays, I would like to mention that we already gained the liberalization on the currency market. And at the same time, in the tax area, we achieved on the businesses and the burden of the business, the value-added tax, for example, being reduced from 20 to 15% in 2019. The corporate tax from 14 to 12, and tax on individuals from 22 to 12%. And social payments to the pension funds reduced from 8% to 0. In agrarian reform, that provides for exemption of farmers from compulsory public order, strengthening the rights of farmers to own land. And on this sector, Uzbekistan ranked also 49th out of 117 countries in the Global Hunger Index, with a moderate index of 10. For the first necessary vital food products, Uzbekistan fully satisfies the internal needs for grain, salt, vegetable oils, eggs, and other foodstuff. And with the sustainability of the food supply system is above 85% nowadays in my country. You know that Uzbekistan, one of the biggest the agriculture producer in the CIS countries and the Central Asia countries. We produce more than 20 million tons of fresh fruits and vegetables, and we also feed with these products our neighboring countries and exporting to Europe, even to Pacific region. Tourism. This is another sector of an important competitive sector of the economy, where the major reforms are being carried out to aim to improving the legal framework. A visa-free regime for the time being has been introduced for citizens of 86 states and simplified visa regime for citizens of 57 states. As a result of the measures taken, the tourism flow only in 2019 amounted almost 7 million people. This is for 2 million people more than in 2016. And during the period of 2015 and 2019, the export of tourism services has just tripled. Accessing to the housing is an important outcome for the outgoing reforms nowadays, and the share of the population living in the comfortable housing is growing rapidly. Only for 2017 and 2018, built to 24 million square meters housing, including the 3.3 thousand square meters housing for standard projects. Qualitative shift taking place in gender equality also, for the creation of the conditions for realization of their potential in socio-economic sphere. In general, there has been a steady increase in the proportion of women in leadership positions from 27% in 2020 to 33% in 2019. The representation of women in senior leadership positions in the structure of government bodies are 10%, middle management 24%, and among farmers 7%. The scientific field, according to the data of 2019, there were 540 doctors of science, almost 3,000 candidates of science, and 5,000 academicians among the women. So developments, and when we are talking about the green, so of course we are talking about the renewable energy. In this sector also, the huge developments are nowadays going in my country, where we are trying to also to attract the, as much as possible, of course, our strategic partners and the companies to develop this renewable energy sector in my country. According to the program of my government, by 2030, Uzbekistan intends to build more than 10 new solar power plants and bring their total capacity up to 5,000 megawatts. Wind power plants up to 3,000 megawatts. Hydroelectric power plants up to 4,000 megawatts, with bringing the share of alternative energy sources in the total energy balance of the country to 25% by 2030. For example, in June this year, we had a bid, and we complete the bid for almost 500 megawatt solar power plant in Surkhandara region. This is the south part of Uzbekistan, where the company from the United Arab Emirates, the Mazda, won this bid, and they are going to implement this project with creation 220 kilowatts substation and 52 kilometers transmission line. And another projects we are now implementing with also with our colleagues and the partners from France. This is the company Proparco, which is going to build a 100 megawatts solar power plant in my country. Additional to that, also another 1,500 megawatt the wind power also going to be built in my country. And just as an example of the necessity and the importance of the sustainable development goals to be implemented in my country also, and contributing to the world community, we had an international conference in my country just in July this month, 16 July. It was the conference devoted to Central and South Asia, regional interconnectedness and the challenges and opportunities, where the leaders from the Central Asia and the South Asia countries visited Uzbekistan, Tashkent, and exchanged views on these very important goals. And during this conference, head of state of Uzbekistan also initiated several initiatives. For example, the creation of the modern, efficient, and safe transport and logistic infrastructure between Central and South Asia countries. This is the railroads and the overland transportation connectivities. Another initiative was devoted to the introduction of the digital platforms. And the third one, it was devoted to the stimulation of the green development. And the main point was given for the solving the problems of the RLC, which has become the planetary character. Because it's not only just the issue of the Central Asia countries, but it's also the worldwide and also the issues which is solving under the UN conventions and etc. So this is the how to say. I would like to just conclude my the short presentation, because I may also discuss and talk about a long. I mean, just much about the achievements and developments in my country, but I think it will be better if you can just make the kind of Q&A. If you have, just I'll be very pleased to answer. And thank you once again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Thanks for running us through Uzbekistan. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker, Aaron, has another meeting to go. So, Lauren, with your permission, I'll ask him to speak first, and then, you know, he can. I will introduce Aaron. So he is thinking out of the box. So he is Mr. Aaron Alovera, and he has a very bold sustainability vision. And through his initiative Earth 300, I'm not going to say any more because he knows his talk. So Aaron, over to you. Bowl them over with what you have.
Thanks, Nomita, and thank you so much, and to your team also at SunMedia for inviting me to be part of Accelerating Green. And thanks to Johan and Johans for moderating this panel, as well as to our audience who are tuning in. It's really a great honor and a great privilege to be part of such a highly prestigious and diverse panel of experts and excellencies from all around the world based here in Singapore. And indeed, it's great to see Singapore stepping up as an environmental champion on the global arena. As you said, Nomita, you know, never before has the question of how is the weather been more important or more relevant or perhaps even more poignant. Our planet is the biological pinnacle of the galaxy, and we're privileged to call it home. You know, so Earth 300 is promoting a 300-year vision that is rooted in the need to ensure that humanity survives the future, and it's been created to ring the climate alarm on a global scale and inspire the greatest and largest collaborative and cooperative climate action effort in history. You know, we're living at a pivotal moment in time where we're facing the greatest challenge to our civilization since the dawn of humankind. As we know, in 2018, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change published a study suggesting that we had until 2030 to avert extreme levels of warming. And that didn't even include tipping points or feedback loops, right? Which we are now seeing, you know, so already with more frequent weather and more frequent violent weather events, you know, the picture is not looking too pretty. Now, there's a lot of great ecological efforts to accelerate sustainability all around the world, as we've seen, you know, from small farmer communities, as Olam mentioned, in developing countries, to large-scale organizations that are like the United Nations and the IUCN. However, there are many silos, and they are simply not moving fast enough. You know, we need more speed, and as His Excellency Ignacio Concha from Chile said, you know, we need large global systemic action. We need rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented solutions if we are to make the cut. You know, Einstein said that it is insanity to perform the same action and expect a different result, you know, and so we need to think differently. And that's what with Earth 300 we are trying to do. You know, we've designed it to be a global multidisciplinary crucible for cultural intelligence, science, and art, and bringing all of that together. You know, we wanted a way in which we could wake up the world to realize about the severity of the climate emergency that we're really facing. You know, so Earth 300 is essentially, you know, we're building a 300-meter long vessel. It's 46-meter wide, 61-meter tall, and it's been designed to capture people's attention on a global scale. You know, so when I sat down with my designer in Barcelona back in 2018, you know, I told him that I wanted this to be designed as a global architectural icon, you know, as the most recognizable object in modern human history, as a scientific sculpture for the Earth, you know, with striking aesthetics that would become known as a universal symbol for sustainability and for the best that humanity has to offer. You know, we wanted to inspire bold thinking on anybody who would see it, you know, like I often describe it as the Eiffel Tower, you know, on the oceans, or the Sydney Opera House, or the Colosseum, you know. And again, we're building it, you know, we've got a partnership with IBM where we're building it as an extreme technology platform for exploration, technology, and innovation on the oceans, you know, so we're equipping it with frontier technologies like AI, robotics, and quantum computing, used to pioneer catalytic blockbuster solutions to address the world's greatest challenges and invent things that will help mitigate the climate crisis. So that's really what it is. And then on board of the vessel, we have a series of communities on board. You know, we have a 160 strong strike force of scientists forming an interdisciplinary team, ranging from Earth to atmospheric to space to marine scientists. And then we will also have 20 experts in residence. So, you know, Neri Oxman from MIT said, you don't solve the climate crisis with a PhD in thermodynamics, right? You need to involve the economists, the entrepreneurs, the explorers, artists, activists. You need to involve polymaths, filmmakers, poets, politicians. Everybody needs to come together and look at it from a different perspective. We're also developing it as a cutting edge media platform where, you know, so we have our chief technology officer, the chief technology officer for Dell for global smart cities is advising us on the technology. And he says, Aaron, we need to design this vessel as a vessel that will be able to carry 1 billion passengers virtually. So anybody can zoom in and look and see what's taking place, you know, look at the latest science and be able to contribute, even though they're in the village in the middle of Africa or South America or wherever it is, if they have an internet connection, of course. So we're bringing different communities together. You know, the idea was to look at conservation in a very different way and make it mainstream. Like if you talk to the average person on the street, the United Nations or the IUCN is something that they just don't recognize or sympathize with. They don't know what it is. And I mean, just having shorter showers or not using plastic straws doesn't seem to make the catch. So what we wanted to do was to marry science and technology, adventure and art, entertainment and education, and put it together in ways that have never before been imagined, you know, and bring these people on board the vessel, you know, world leaders on unique trailblazing expeditions, you know, where intellectuals would meet with excitement, you know, with the scientists, and consumers will become contributors, you know. So I describe it as the ultimate experience for science, where you're sitting under the tree with Newton when the apple falls, or you're in the lab holding electrodes with Edison, you know, and you're there contributing to science, participating to the science, and experiencing firsthand what is happening, right? So we want to create a new brand of enlightened explorers, you know, so even the interiors will be designed to be whimsical and magical and fantastical to inspire the imaginations of those people who come on board and allow them to see for the first time something from a very different way, right? So most people, they think they know it all, but then what we want to do is allow them to get a little bit positively confused, you know, where they can, where their brains can take in new information. And that's what happens when you're in a state of wonder. So again, Earth 300 has been birthed to become the birthplace and the benchmark of the world's most wonderful ideas, a platform to fuel and foster catalytic, imaginative thinking, And so that is really what Earth 300 is, and making science attractive, making science sexy to the mainstream so that people understand what it is, making scientists the new celebrities of the 21st century, right? We have great respect for the great singers and performers and footballers, and we call them celebrities. But why not, if we were to start to celebrate a new kind of planetary vanguard, scientists, engineers, inventors? These people need the right platform. Then the other thing that I wanted to mention was the propulsion on the vessel is also very different. So we are using, we're pursuing the only technology which can provide true 100% emission-free power for large assets. So we're looking at atomic energy represented by a new technology called the molten salt reactor, which is a dramatic departure from traditional atomic energy, which is using pressurized steam. So this technology still gives you all of the benefits of the atom, but it's very different and very safe compared to traditional nuclear energy. So ultimately, with this project, we want to inspire a new vision for conservation. We want to inspire a new brand of planetary vanguards, ethical leaders who will support new economic and ecological visions for the world, where they will embrace a new narrative that will move us towards a post-carbon ecological society. Before, Christopher from Olam spoke about circularity and about soil. And if you look at nature, I think the definition of circularity is in nature, right? Where no organism creates true waste. It is only the human being that is creating real waste. And I believe that it is because we need to relook at the economic model. At the moment, economic models are flawed. They're based on positive feedback loops, right? So the more you make, the more you sell, the more money you make, the more you manufacture, the more you sell, and it's positive. So eventually, we're going to end up with a massive 10 billion person bubble in 2050 that we may not even reach to. So we need to incorporate negative feedback loops like you have in nature, right? So if there's too much, for example, foxes in the forest, that are killing a lot of the deer, that has its own regulation, its own regulatory loop. So I think we need a new model for the economy. We need to design a new model. And I mean, there's a lot of countries that are spearheading this already, but the window of time is closing, and I really encourage us all to think differently and act more boldly. So that's really what I wanted to say. Thank you so much for listening and for having me as part of this eminent panel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron, for that power-packed speed. Your conversation was as fast as your board, and a lot of information for us to digest, but I'm very glad you're here. And I would say, yeah, this is thinking out of the box. And I believe you are not able to stay for question and answer session, but nevertheless, we will send you the questions because Accelerating Green has just been launched. So we will have many other opportunities for us to address these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nomita, and my apologies. I just have a very important meeting in 10 minutes.
No problem.
I cannot miss it. But thank you so much to everyone. And yeah, if you have any questions, let's connect privately. I'll be happy to engage. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. Thanks, Johan and Johans and everybody else on the panel. Thank you very much.
Now our next speaker, Lauren Sokin. You've been extremely patient, and my appreciation for that. I see you in all sustainability talks. Everybody knows they recognize you. And Lauren is Executive Director of Resilient Cities Network. Lauren is a well-known face and a voice in sustainability circuits. Lauren leads global efforts to strengthen the ability of 96 cities in over 40 countries to deal with complex challenges. Over to you, Lauren. Tell us your story.
Thank you so much, Nomita, and it is really a pleasure to be here on such an eminent panel amongst ambassadors, thought leaders, business leaders in this space. So I come from a little bit of a different place, and I think that my talk is actually a very good complement to Aaron's, because where he is going into the future and into the sea, it's the role of Resilient Cities Network to really ground action and help actors to meet one another where we are now, and to really help to build safe, equitable, and sustainable cities and the capacities for that. So I'm going to share just a couple of slides to talk through how you take a resilience practitioner mindset and turn these massive challenges that we have into opportunities. And then I'm going to reflect on some of the ways that we've been able to do this with Resilient Cities Network, and specifically how businesses and the public sector can get together. I think there's been a lot said about this. And there are really ways to do this practically. And we need to do more of it because that's really the way we're going to accelerate green. So let me see if I can project this smoothly, easily transition over. So tell me if this is now coming through for you all. Yes, okay. So I'm not going to play our video about resilience now, but I will pop the link into the chat for anyone who's interested. But I think when we talk about accelerating green and resilience, it's important to define what we mean and to align on where we're going here. Now, green and sustainability is part of it, but actually if we don't address equity, right, and fairness, then we will never really achieve these sustainability goals. There will always be these tensions between what people view as economic acceleration and providing resources to developing economies while we try to balance sustainability. And it doesn't have to be a tension. You can actually have a win here. And so when we talk about resilience, what we're talking about is our ability to survive, adapt, and grow. And the growth is the important part, no matter what kind of shocks and stresses we are experiencing. And so when you build resilient cities, resilient nations, resilient economies, you're actually able to have better business models that can address multiple challenges at once. And the multiple challenges that we're all facing right now, and we know them very well, are social, environmental, and economic. So what do we do at Resilient Cities Network? How do we actually address this issue? We found that in order to do this, we have to build our own capacities, right? The capacities of people, and we work in the urban environment. So the examples I'll share are city examples. We empower cities. So we help them to build the skills they need to have systems within the city and institutions to do this work. And then we implement programs across multiple cities who unite around a common agenda. We know that cities are on the front lines of a lot of these challenges. Esther spoke to this in her talk. Cities concentrate both challenges and opportunities. They emit more than 70% of greenhouse gases, but they also concentrate a lot of our risk, whether that is in terms of vulnerable communities who don't have access to services, or those who are in particular in Africa and in developing Asia, really on the front lines of dealing with climate change impacts. And then we also help mobilize investment. We know that we need partnerships to address these issues. The public sector cannot do this alone. And His Excellency, the Ambassador from Uzbekistan, spoke about this very clearly in terms of the partnerships that are required to drive sustainable investments in his nation. And so that is our model. We are a network of 100 cities globally that we have stretching all the way from Wellington in New Zealand to Chennai in India, to Lagos in Nigeria, to Boston, to San Francisco, London, Paris, Ramallah in Palestine. So we are truly a diverse and global network that works together to implement safe, equitable, and sustainable solutions. The foundation of this work is people. And so I just wanted to talk for 30 seconds about the kinds of people that lead this work. Embedded in each and every city leadership group is a chief resilience officer whose job it is to break down silos. We often nickname them the chief silo busters because they must operate between sustainability groups, economic groups, strategic planners, land use planners, break down silos so that initiatives that the city plans and invests in have multiple benefits. And these are senior individuals who we train in change management and resilience and systems thinking. And our network now, second bedrock, is resilience strategies. You must develop, in order to achieve these goals, a strategic vision. And these are generational challenges. So these are not short-term plans. These are medium-term plans that look at a city's capacities and opportunities, and they lay out specific goal areas and initiatives. And so our reach now is to 220 million urban dwellers. We have 84 chief resilience officers around the world, more than 4,000 projects ongoing, and we're driving billions of dollars of investment into network cities. What makes this possible? The fact that no matter how much challenge we have, the odds are someone else has dealt with this similar group of challenges. So we see that our cities are able to help each other and have a network of trust, and that is what accelerates progressive solutions. So what are we focused on? Circular economy is one of our pillars. As this panel, we also are looking very closely at climate resilience. And as I mentioned, equity and economic opportunity cuts through everything that we do. I'm going to speak to one specific example here because I was asked to speak about how the private sector and the public sector can really work together to accelerate change. And so I'm going to use the example of our partnership with Visa. Visa came to us in the throes of the pandemic and said, we really want to use our digital technologies for good to accelerate economic inclusion and to have an impact on cities in Latin America that are emerging. And so what we did is we took our cities, their strategies as the foundation, and we looked around the network to see who had the most compelling projects that could come together and do a pilot. And together we designed projects that were ready to go within 6 months. This is only possible when you have a foundation of a common goal, when you have strategies in place, and when you have capacity, chief resilience officers or other leaders in the city who are ready to act. And so those are really the magic ingredients in moving fast. And moving fast is what we must do to accelerate green. Now, we have many different partnerships and we welcome more partnerships. And I think this is the role of networks to help broker important partnerships for cities so that these are not one-by-one approaches, but rather these are approaches at scale. And so then the last thing I was going to say that I think is really crucial for accelerating action in cities on all of these issues of green, of social, and of economic development are being close to your partners and stakeholders. And we are very proud to be headquartered in Singapore so that we are close to our partners in emerging markets. It's really critical to do that, to understand, to spend the time with one another, to build that trust, to do ambitious things. And so with that, I'm just going to close and say that, you know, when we understand our counterparts, our communities, our cities, we can link and align the interests with corporations, build resilient cities, and achieve a more sustainable world. So thank you very much again for the opportunity. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Namita.
Over to you, Johan. I think you're leading the Q&A, fast-paced Q&A. Thank you very much, Lauren.
Great. Your Excellency, Lauren, thank you so much. That was very insightful. Your Excellency, I have a short and simple question for you. I'm amazed at the work that the Uzbekistan government has done to increase the attraction of the country for foreign direct investment, ease of doing business, innovation, etc. What I would like to hear from you is what actions have the Uzbekistan government taken to encourage the adoption of a circular economy? Do you have examples for us in this regard, maybe from a policy perspective, and also maybe a few practical examples of what is happening at ground level? Your Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Burger, for your question. Yes, of course. Within the strategy for the transition of the green economy, of course, Uzbekistan also has our own strategy in terms of the circular economy and the circular economy, because you know it was also untouched. This area was untouched many years, because of the lack of the economy, lack of the technology, lack of experience, and etc. But since this technology being developed in the worldwide, and of course the companies also, this sector is becoming the more attractive for the foreign companies as well. And the Uzbekistan also developed its own strategy to solve this problem inside the country. And just I would like to tell you that by the end of 2020, the volume of processing of the solid household waste increased to almost 22%. And our target by 2021, this year, to increase this volume up to more than 36%. This is also the huge developments and the huge our own targets. But at the same time, we still need the partners, the strategic partners. Therefore, for example, nowadays, just as a small example, I can tell you that with some Singaporean companies nowadays, we are developing and discussing about implementing those solid waste, the technology to be implemented in Uzbekistan. For example, we would like to start with the small scale, with some regions, districts of the cities, and then to implement this multiple effect to other cities in my country and other cities of inside Uzbekistan. This is one of the examples. And of course, the companies from Europe, say from Germany, from Italy, also very aggressive and very good players in this market in my country. Of course, I can tell you that before, it was challenging for us to deal with this issue. Why? Because everything was managed by the government before. Nowadays, the PPP scheme, this public-private partnership schemes, are widely implementing even in this scheme, in this sector as well. Therefore, the market is open for the collaboration and the future collaboration with foreign companies as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Your Excellency. Obviously, I think this is the kind of environment that creates wonderful opportunities for local and foreign investors, and doing well while doing good. So I'm a big fan of that, and I'm excited to hear about the potential there. So thank you for that answer. Lauren, in the interest of time, I'm not going to belabor the questions as far as the ambassador is concerned. In terms of city development, if we look at the developed world, cities are well planned mostly, but when you look at developing world, and unfortunately I'm going to look back at my continent, which I'm a big fan of, I'm an unashamed Afro-optimist. Unfortunately, city planning is not as well developed as in other parts of the world. And what we are seeing is that cities happen. There's a strong trend towards urbanization, and the figures that I've had a look at, looking at by 2050, 57% of 2.4 billion people are going to be in our cities. And a lot of them is going to be as the current trend is going on, a lot of that's going to be unplanned. How do we help developing countries? How do we get them to adopt better practices so that they are more sustainable and that they do become resilient? Because that, I think, is the ultimate kind of solution that we're looking towards. And together with that, I would like you to elaborate also a bit on an issue that Johanne raised in private discussion when she said that she would be very much interested if you can share about the business city collaboration as a breakthrough. You mentioned it in your talk, but what challenges do you find have they been facing shifting towards an independent status? This is now the city scenario, and what can others learn from this? I know it's a mouthful, but if you can address those two issues, I'd be very much appreciative.
Well, happy to speak to those issues, Johan, but I think we could probably have an entire separate session just on the first question. I would also say that, just because a city is in industrialized nation doesn't mean it's been well planned. I think we've seen over the last several months how battered a number of cities in my home country, which is the US, have been by fairly simple types of weather occurrences, whether those are winter storms or floods. that confound, energy systems and so on. So I think we do have issues of sprawl. We do have issues of planning around the world. Now, the opportunity is here, as you said so well, Johan, with so much movement into cities, right? We're going to be a 70% urban species by 2050 by most estimations. And in Asia Pacific, the estimates are that about 50% of the infrastructure that we need hasn't been built yet, and that includes Central Asia as well. So we've got this massive once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build it better. Now, at the same time, we're dealing with massive challenges of informality, and you're hailing from South Africa. That's just as true here in Bangkok or in Chennai, where we have somewhere between 8 and 20% of urban residents who are living in informal settlements. So we need to develop solutions that are going to work and that are going to offer better housing, safety for these folks, as well as for those who are moving into our cities with more means. That really comes down to aligning those interests, right? Setting those definitions of what we're looking for. In order to build resilience, we have to really simultaneously do two things. We must commit ourselves to net zero in these new building approaches, and we have to offer incentives for that. We're seeing, and Esther spoke to this, more and more financial actors aligning their financing to green targets. This has a long way to go between the spoken word and the action, and we need to keep narrowing that gap and get those financial flows to subnational projects, in particular in emerging markets, and that takes a lot of work to do. And the other piece of the work that we must do is simultaneously address the resilience and the vulnerability issues, because no matter what we do now in terms of emissions reduction, the next 10 years, we're going to increasingly face the kinds of challenges that we've seen: storms, floods, changes in monsoon, change in food security. So we have to actually prepare ourselves, run our scenarios, and that's a global effort. And that takes a lot of openness and increased communication. So I think those are the key things. I think where we come in and we try to do our part is to bridge that gap between cities and businesses where there are stated aligned interests. And there's a massive amount that can be done there. Nary a day goes by lately that a corporate doesn't reach out to us and say, look, we've got a solution that we want to pilot in 5 or 10 cities. Can we work together to do it? And where we have the demand for cities, we're able to say yes. And I think that's a space that more and more people can work at. Generally, what prevents that from happening is that it's very costly to do business city by city by city. And so where we can, as a network, offer scale, that's what we do. I think the challenges there are around language and around getting comfortable. I think there's a lot of mistrust sometimes between business and the public sector initially in those conversations, that everyone's trying to sell something or get at a short term or a transaction. And I think resilience and green challenges, like I mentioned in my talk, they're generational challenges. So we need to focus on building robust relationships rather than on short-term outcomes. And I think that's where I would stop and say, that's really where forums like this, where different kinds of folks come together, are increasingly important.
May I make the one amendment?
Thanks, Your Excellency.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Berger, when you talk about this development of the cities, the townships, and etc., I mean the developments, I mean just movement of the people to the urbanization. So we, at the same time, so we shouldn't forget about the development of the rural area. Because when we are talking about the food security, this all devoted and related with the rural area, the farmers there, and the infrastructure there, and the community there, and all necessary the green elements, developing and introducing those elements in the rural area. This is the most, one of the, I think also another important area we should take care.
I could not agree more, Your Excellency. When you only place the focus on the cities, indeed, rural areas run dry, and you need development and growth there as well, so that you have growth nodes to keep back the people in the rural areas various reasons. Takes the pressure off the cities, takes the pressure off the lack of infrastructure that inevitably is going to be there. So a very valid point. So thank you for that contribution. For my part, Your Excellency, Lauren, thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to Johan. Johan, your summary, please.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let me say that I'm amazed at how this three very, very different perspectives that the three of you have brought together have actually do come together. Ambassador, what you're sharing from Uzbekistan is a stunning example of how a country is in the beautiful position of seeing what's happening right now, not simply as a challenge, but as an opportunity to leapfrog who and what it is, and that the weird situation of having been left behind is actually giving you an asset for right now. And that's, I think, is a huge equalizer in the world today that not everyone is appreciating. And I really love the way that you landed that, and that in such a comparatively short space of time, you'll be at 25% renewable energy. The juxtaposition that Aaron and Lauren brought in between, interestingly, both talking about multi-generational visions, 300-year type stories, but taking incredibly different out-of-the-box approaches to how they're addressing it. One with a huge, powerful, futuristic, break the silos, put things together, act bold, and then the other with, let's get very present here and now and practical, because there's an awful lot that we can do right now, because there's a significant amount of wisdom that already exists that can be put into action. And the collaborative partnership structure that Lauren is showcasing through the Resilient Cities Network shows the power of this. And a couple of the takeaways that I have when I was listening to both Your Excellency's conversation and Lauren's is that the capacity building creates so much. The breaking down silos is critical. That somebody else has solved it. How can we find that information and share? And behind all that, the accelerator is actually the relationships and trust that people have. Because without that, people aren't going to invest, they're not going to commit, and they're not going to take action. And those three things behind the scenes are what actually adds life. And if I look at the wonderful picture that you have behind you, Ambassador, and the symbolism there of the bird, that's what helps green accelerate and take flight. So let me say thank you both, and also to Aaron, who's unfortunately not with us, for what you've contributed to the conversation today. Over to you, Namita.
Thank you very much, everybody. I couldn't have imagined a better outcome for the launch of Accelerating Green. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know whether I can sleep well tonight or I cannot sleep at all. I don't know right now. But it has been overwhelming, the sharing. We are around 30 minutes past our time, but we are all here listening, which means we have gotten something to say and something to act on. And that makes me tremendously happy. And I would like to thank those who started with us and are not, I can't see them on this stage, but I will go one by one. I would like to thank the Dean George Timor for launching the initiative. I would like the President of Singapore Manufacturing Federation, Douglas Wu, for his insights into what manufacturing is doing. I would like to thank High Commissioner of Australia, Will Hodgman. His country is really showing us the way, and this is something we must emulate and must partner. And our Bapa Krishnawan has a big story to share about how Indonesia is taking steps towards accelerating green. And we are hopeful that we are able to work together as Singapore to really get the desired results. Thank you, Ambassador Ignacio Concha, for sharing. You know, sometimes Chile looks far, far, far away, but I think with these collaborations, we can come closer than we think. Aaron has a vision, and I hope it really comes true and comes together, and we have something like a Taj Mahal on the seas accelerating green. And Joanne, you were fabulous. I'm so thankful for your dedication and time. and being with this project, which was just a whim to begin with a few months ago. And I really appreciate your love, partnership, and involvement. My gratitude from my heart. And Your Excellency, His Excellency Modisi Mokatlane, you've always been my biggest supporter with whatever I do. I cannot be more grateful. Africa has been a continent which I have been working on many years. I have publication on your country, and I'm hoping that your voice, your words rings out there, and we are able to do more sustainable projects and start things and conversations between your country and ours. And Christopher Stewart almost took me on a picnic with his talks on soil and how important it is. And I will most certainly bear it in my mind while we are planning the next set of our conferences. Johann Berger, you have been my mentor for many, many years. You have been part of my small, big, mad, and not so mad projects. And I appreciate and value your support and your participation so, so very much. My gratitude from my heart. And Your Excellency, Khakram Wanshaki, now you are a very dear friend, and we have a magazine on your country. We have seen how we have had a relationship with your country and have been promoting it in Singapore from the time your embassy was established. And we are very honored by this partnership. And we know there is a lot of opportunity that can be between Singapore and Uzbekistan, and also the other countries which are represented here. And I hope all these things come together. Esther Ann was very kind in her sharing. She has been walking the talk. And the systematic way of approaching sustainability, the CDL way, there is something we can share with other countries, and we can avoid pitfalls. And that's exactly why I started this forum, because we learn from each other, we don't fall, and we rise together, and we are able to protect our Mother Earth from deteriorating further. Today, the Accelerating Green Sustainability Initiative also had Lauren Sorkin, and she's done such remarkable work with sustainable cities. I used to think in my heart, cities can never be sustainable, but she's shown me otherwise. And with networks and collaborations, I think there is a lot we can do together because we think in the same direction. We believe that countries, corporations, and communities together can achieve a green future. On behalf of Accelerating Green and in Diplomacy, I would like to thank Excellencies, our speakers, moderators for their insights on actions and challenges. A round of applause. I wish I was there to even give each one of you a hug, because you feel and you deliver, and that's the human touch. My special thanks to all the speakers for your sharing, and my very dear SunMedia team who have worked relentlessly for many, many weeks. My special thanks to Jafar, Swati, Martin, Brandon, Shivam, Yashika, Vinivesh, and Mayur. Your dedication makes me want to come to work every day. And now the next set of, if you have stories to share on sustainability in your countries, please send them to us, because we have mediums to even amplify your messages. So we have a weekly newsletter on sustainability. We'll be very happy to give coverage to any new developments you have. The next set of conferences that you should look forward to from us is Global Green Financing Opportunities, Energy and Sustainability, Eco-Friendly and Sustainable Fashion, because how can we leave fashion behind? We must have it too. So with that, I would like to thank you again and consider this launch a great success. And we can close this meeting. And my apologies if I held you too long, but what can you do? We are saving the earth. Even a lifetime is not too long to extend, isn't it? Any words from anyone? You are most welcome, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All the best.
Thank you very much, Excellency.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Parth.
Thank you, everybody. Nomita.
Thank you so much.
Excellencies.
Bye-bye.
Till we meet again.
See you next time.
Bye. Till the next time.
Namaste.
Bye-bye, Namita.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks.
Well done, everybody. Well done.
Okay, guys, you all can switch on your cameras now. The team, please.